You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Hello?
Hello.
Who is this?
Tell me your name, I'll tell you mine.
I don't think so.
What's that noise?
Popcorn.
You making popcorn?
I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
Never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Hello?
Hello, Sydney. Remember me?
What do you want?
It's time, girlfriend. Don't you know history repeats itself?
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon,
we're going to teach you heathens about hell and the dangers of communism. Join the sleaze.
We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for almost 4 years. We have been doing for 4 years. Almost. Yeah. We're about to hit our 5th year of bonus episodes. So. Yeah, so if you haven't made the jump yet, there are over 100 bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films over at patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, available. And speaking of which, we did have a couple of people make the jump this week, so we're going to give them their shout out here. We have Joseph. We have Hunter Biden's owl hallucination.
Welcome aboard.
We have Jim Jam, who signed up at the annual tier. So thanks so much to Jim Jam. We have Henry Ermer. We have Brian Roethlisberger. We have Logan Kirk. And we have Jeremy K.O. So thanks so much to you guys for signing up. Hope you're enjoying all of those bonus episodes. Yeah. That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I know that you are, I see the stats. I see you right now listening on Apple Podcasts. Scroll down to the very bottom while you're listening to this and give us a good old rating and review down there. It helps us climb the ranks over at iTunes and find new listeners. And that's what's the last plug? Merch. If you guys like the poster art that local horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show, you can get that put on basically anything that you want: a hoodie, a shirt, a notebook, a pillow, a whatever you can think of. You can probably get something with the logo on it. You can find that link in the description, as well as at sleazoidspodcast.com. Whew. All right. Yeah. Welcome back to another week, folks. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks, the free listeners, would have heard from us, and we would have been doing a gargantuan one, the best genre movies of 2021. Jamie and I counted down both our honorable mentions for the year as well as our top 10s, going back and forth, and that episode was 3 hours and 40 minutes long. I hope you guys made it. It was a big listen. We definitely struggled a bit near the end there. Yeah. But hey, there was a lot of great movies, and the reason that episode was so long is because we couldn't shut up about honorable mentions, and that's usually the section where we are naming some of the most underseen films of that given year. So
let's get your watch list out and start adding. That's what that section is.
Exactly. So that was over on the main feed for all the free listeners. Hope you guys have already heard it, but if not, Jamie and I's best genre movies of 2021. We put it to bed. Go check it out. And then last week, we went back to regular scheduled programming with the first official episode of the new year, which was a patron-voted episode, which I'm sure most of you know by now, but the Patreon subscribers get to vote on an episode that comes out once every other month, where they nominate the double feature and then they vote on it, and we do whatever movies you guys want us to cover. And that episode was on the Yakuza from 1974, directed by Sidney Pollack and written by Paul Schrader and his brother, and Extreme Prejudice, 1987, directed by Walter Hill. That episode was nominated by patron Christian, and it was a really fun chat to have, which was basically very much dudes rock hours of friendship and honor and codes and lots of violence, and how all of that gets physically expressed in one. You get kind of like a Yakuza film / American thriller, and then the other one you get just a really bleak and brutal Western, which is essentially Walter Hill trying to do Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch. So if that interests you at all, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. That was last week's bonus episode. But moving on to this week, this is the rare guestless episode, just the OG boys on the main feed. We got no one joining us this week, and that's because we knew this episode was going to be long, regardless of if we had someone on it or not. Yeah. So we thought that we would just tackle it ourselves, which we sometimes do when we do big triple feature episodes like what we're going to be doing today. And that is because just yesterday, I'm hoping, because we are recording this a little bit before it's happened, but just yesterday, a brand new Scream movie should have opened in theaters. Scream 5, the first one not directed by Wes Craven.
And it was really good, right?
Yeah, I hope it is the first one without Craven, so I'm a little concerned about that. But it did make sense and gives us a great excuse to go back and talk about Craven, someone that we've talked about a couple times on this show, but we've been saving this because we kind of knew eventually this was probably going to come back at some point. So it makes sense. Scream is coming back. People are going to be talking about it. A lot of the younger viewers are going to be going back to the 90s. Yeah, and which is cool. We thought it would be a great time to do it ourselves and talk Scream from 1996. The follow-up, really hasty follow-up, Scream 2, 1997, actually came out less than a year after the first one.
Wow.
If you can believe it. And Scream 3 from the year 2000, all directed by Wes Craven, all written by Kevin Williamson, except for sort of the third one, which we'll get into some of the specifics of. Well, it has an official screenwriter who is a different screenwriter, but Williamson did develop like a 30-page treatment or something, so a lot of it is still Williamson. So, yeah, we're going to be this week breaking down the slasher sort of rejuvenating box office smashes in the late 90s, the Scream films. And yeah, I'm very excited to talk about them because Scream, I don't know about your experience, Jamie, but I think we're at the right age where Scream was kind of like, for me, it was kind of like a gateway movie a little bit. Scream was one of the first sort of bigger horror movies that I watched. And when I watched it, sort of similar to our best genre movies of 2021, I took the pen and paper out, man. I was like, what are these movies they're talking about?
I would say Scream is probably one of my formative horror movies, just because I think it was one of the first that I kind of snuck at, a sleepover that I wasn't supposed to be.
Definitely
I wasn't supposed to be
a huge
watching
video era release.
yeah, and it was also a movie that was constantly on television, so I might have even watched the cable censored version of it before I actually got to watch the big gory version of it. So this was one of my first slashers that I saw, which is interesting just because it has the satirical elements. So it's kind of interesting for this to be formative when it's directly referencing so many other films that we wouldn't have even really known about, maybe besides Reputation at the time. I find that interesting that it's something that we started satirically rather than like an actual sincere slasher.
Yeah, well, for me, it was just one of the first movies where I actually recognized that there was people making the film and that they were talking about other films and that there was, directing happening. And I was like, so for me, it was a really, really big deal, which is why I'm excited that we're finally covering it on the show. But yeah, that being said, we probably should just get right into it. For most people who have been listening for a while, they probably heard us do triple feature episodes. They kind of know how it works. Yeah. most of the time we kind of every so often we kind of collapse all of the different segments together. I think for this one we are going to give Scream its own segment just because it is Scream. It's huge. It's one of the biggest horror films of the 90s in general. So I think it deserves its own segment. But then we're going to break into the second segment where we usually cover one film, and we're going to talk Scream 2 and 3 kind of together, because by the time we're talking about those, you guys will definitely already have an idea of the formula and the beats, and we don't need to go through all of that a second time for those. So,
and at the very least that they do repeat a formula throughout, which is on purpose. But yeah, we don't want to just keep reiterating that for you guys to get a little dull.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about the basic premise like 3 times over again. We'll just do it once.
Someone's trying to kill Sydney.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, so let's jump into it here. Let's talk about Scream.
He didn't make the rules.
Police are always on track, but they watch prom night at same time.
He just kills by them. Don't answer the phone. Don't open the door. Don't try to hide.
Everybody's a suspect!
You're not scared, are you?
Scream.
All right, we are talking Scream, the 1996 American satirical slasher film directed by Wes Craven and written by Kevin Williamson. The film stars a huge cast of Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, Jamie Kennedy. Lee Schreiber, even very briefly, makes an appearance that becomes a little bit bigger of an appearance in the sequels. Drew Barrymore, very famously in the opening sequence of this film. So
she was supposed to be Sid, right? Like originally?
Teen cast. I actually read that Drew Barrymore always wanted to be the opening scene. And because she loved the idea of being a new generation's like a Janet Leigh Psycho kind of deal.
Right.
So again, there's kind of conflicting stories on it on whether Drew Barrymore was courting like the lead role, but I actually heard just by watching interviews with Craven, Craven was saying that Drew Barrymore was attached even before he was attached because she loved the idea of being killed in the opening scene.
Yeah, I heard
and that having such a huge, shocking impact.
Yeah, I heard that Wes actually wasn't even really that interested until he heard about Barrymore, just because he felt. I think that was kind of the initial thought of him saying like, oh, I could kind of spin this on its head and make it, I mean, it really turns into the satirical elements, but I think that was probably the initial thought he had when he saw Drew Barrymore wanted to be killed on camera. He was like, oh, wow, I can kind of subvert that a little bit. So that was his initial interest.
It was definitely a really big screenplay around the time that it was being shopped by Kevin Williamson. It was originally developed under the title Scary Movie, right, which I do love because it has ironic. The eventual parody of it was actually called that. But I love that it was just called that because it has this kind of like generic nostalgic quality to it.
Definitely.
Which is, where the film was actually born from.
Yeah. I do like though that like I hate that it's Weinstein that ended up being the change, but
yes,
I will say I think it was a good change just because I think leading into the movie as if it's not satirical really helps with those elements, because then once you start diving into it, especially with Kennedy's character where he's like giving you the rules and all of that, you start it starts to become more obvious what he's doing as the movie goes on, and I think going along with the ride like that is much more fun than because if you called it Scary Movie, even without the reference that we have now, which is an outright parody, I think just calling it that, you would think more like along the lines of Spaceballs or stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it was a smart idea to make it a more sincere horror title, and then fall in line with the satirical elements a little later on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's the central kind of push and pull of this entire movie is that
exactly.
On one level, this is a satirical film written by Williamson, which was basically just born from, his love of sort of trashy horror slashers as a kid, and something that he saw that was kind of on its deathbed in the 90s and really wanting to kind of revive it. You know, he loved Halloween, he loved Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, but even like, you know, sort of lesser known ones like Prom Night or When a Stranger Calls or My Bloody Valentine, Black Christmas, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Reference in this.
Yes, all end up referenced at some point or another. And yeah, so you have on one level this very sort of self-consciously written film about slasher films and about horror films, but then you bring someone in who is someone who helped sort of godfather in the style of those, literally Wes Craven, who directed the original Nightmare on Elm Street and basically established what these movies are. And you have him direct it like it's a real deal thing. Yeah. And that is what really, really makes the film work. Because I think there is a version of this that I hate, which is just someone who made this and made it as a parody. And I think even when the screenplay was being shopped around, it was being shopped around and being asked, it was being given to like directors like Romero and Raimi and people who passed on it because people were reading it and thinking, this is just kind of silly. This is just a parody. This is a comedy. This is not a horror film. And that is kind of Craven's genius, was that he saw it. And I think he felt that way about it too. But then he came back to it with an approach and he said, okay, what if I made this a real deal horror movie? Make it dark and wet and brutal, despite the obviously satirical, you know, whodunit genre commentary and affection that's being expressed on the page.
Yeah, because like I'm jumping ahead, but I just think it's a really good example. It's when it's the garage scene with Rose McGowan when she's about to be killed in the party, and her dialogue in that scene is nonstop satirical, like slasher killer dialogue, and not only up to the point of when she's kind of actively toying with the killer in the garage, but even after she says like, I'm done, she doesn't say like, hey, fuck off, I'm done. She says, all right, that's a wrap. You know what I mean? Like she has to still put the film terminology into the scene even after her character is done with that little teasing play that they were doing. And in those moments, if I could not help but think like if any other person was directing this, that would come off so annoying and cheesy and just bad.
Exactly.
And I can't help but think like, and maybe you can clarify it. Was the writer, when he was doing more of these like over the top moments, do you think he had the confidence within Wes, or do you think Wes was more of the molder of making these scenes work a little bit better in general, or was it a fusion of the two?
I think it's a fusion of the two because I think that Williamson's script is good.
Yeah, I do too.
But I do think that it needed a director to take it to the next level it needed to go. I think that there are moments in this that wouldn't have worked without someone like Craven behind it. But I also think that Williamson on some level had to have known that, because when they were shopping it around, they were shopping it around to real deal directors. He was trying to get Romero to do it. He was trying to get Raimi to do it. Like he was trying to get
people
one of his
understood
horror heroes who knew the tone between horror and comedy and, you know, would actually make it a real movie. And so I think that Williamson on some level was smart enough to know that.
Okay, cool.
But I do think that there are stuff on the page that you read it and you're like, I don't know if I read that on the page, if that would have worked for me. And then in the movie, it works like gangbusters. And it's like one of those things that it's kind of just like pure magic of combination that ended up, you know, being what happened here. Because I'm certain most people have seen Scream. But by any chance, if someone who listens to a show called Sleazoids hasn't seen the movie Scream, the basic premise is that there is a serial murderer wearing a cheap Halloween costume that gets him dubbed the Ghostface Killer, and he is essentially terrorizing the small town of Woodsboro, including a high school girl by the name of Sydney Prescott, played by Ontario Queen Neve Campbell.
Oh, I didn't even know that, actually. That's awesome.
Right, baby. I can't remember if it was Guelph, I think, that I read, but yeah, she's from here. And her immediate friend group, her best friend Tatum, played by Rose McGowan, her boyfriend Billy Loomis, played by Skeet Ulrich, who I'm 100% convinced was cast because of how much he looks like Johnny Depp did in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, 100%. That's the first time I saw him in this movie. I was like, Johnny Depp.
Yeah,
100%.
There's his friend and Tatum's boyfriend Stu, played by Matthew Lillard.
God.
Incredible performance.
God
Matthew
among men.
Lillard, the God, dude. You'll be so excited when you eventually get around to Twin Peaks and you see that Twin Peaks: The Return brought Matthew Lillard back, and he's so fucking good in it.
Dude, I love Lillard
underrated
to
actor.
death. Yeah, he absolutely is. He's so good at playing like eccentric, kind of strange characters, and I think it was either Anna or Meg that came onto the show. I think it was one of those two that said that he's got the best tongue acting in the game, and I think that's very funny because it's true. Like I actually recently watched Hackers for the first time in a little while, and he's just so fun in it. He's just so great, and he kind of takes those similar mannerisms that he has into this character Stu, who's essentially playing like a suppressed killer in a sense. Like even at the beginning when you get the introduction to their two characters interacting with everyone in front of the school, like Stu is quite obviously just a pretty outlandish and crazy person. Like he's even, I love the line, for instance, that he says, like when he's like, only a man could do something like that, and he almost says it with
like
pride.
got someone from like whatever to sternum or whatever.
Yeah, and he almost says it with like a male pride about it as well. In a sense, it's very funny. But yeah, I'll just go gaga over Matthew for too long, but he's just fantastic.
We'll definitely come back to him a couple times because he's got some great moments in this film.
Oh yeah.
But there's their movie dork friend Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy. There's Tatum's brother, Deputy Dewey, played by David Arquette, who's kind of supposed to be a cross between kind of like a young, naive cop, but also plus kind of like your dumb older brother in one character.
Yeah. And trying to play hero is
Gail
so great.
Weathers, played by Courtney Cox, who is a news reporter trying to get the scoop on the murders and make money off of them, as well as Sydney's trauma over her past tragedy as well, involving the rape and murder of her mother just a year earlier. And the thing that was really unique about this film around the time that it came out, and I could tell that it was what people were freaking out about because I went and read a bunch of old reviews to kind of get an idea of what people were responding to. And the thing that people were responding to the most and wouldn't shut up about was that it was a movie that had characters who were movie nerds in it. These were characters who had seen the films that they were finding themselves in. They talked about the films. They provided commentary on those films and on itself while going through its own plot. You know, it wasn't just talking about the rules of surviving horror movies, but it was also like, you know, like the moment when the killer calls Sydney and she says that she doesn't watch horror movies because it's all about some big-breasted, dumb woman who just who is always running up the stairs when she should be running out the front door. She calls it insulting.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was finding ways to talk about, you know, to make a movie about characters who have actually ingested decades upon decades of genre films, which was, you know, obviously what kind of made the movie translate then over to, you know, burgeoning film nerds such as ourselves. Maybe we're like, hey, film nerds on screen. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that is definitely the thing that people seem to latch on to the most and made it really, really unique and special to people when they first watched it, even though it seems like that quality seems to have, in some ways, I don't want to say dated it, but kind of, I think people look back on it now, and even if they really like the movie, they do find like that kind of reference humor is so dominant in culture
now
at large.
Yeah.
Now,
well, here's
that I think people look back on this in not necessarily negative way specifically for the film, because the film obviously does it well. It's just one of those things where, like, I think it does get blamed as being patient zero for, you know, Reddit brained movie watching.
Yeah.
Because it literally has a dude who would absolutely be on our movies in the movie.
Yeah. And absolutely. Randy definitely would be. What I think I like about this, though, is that it's never doing the point and, oh, I recognize that thing that most of the referential writing is doing nowadays. It's not like this fan service shit. Usually when they bring up a movie, it's usually to kind of give this idea of like what a character should maybe do next because they know how to defend themselves now. Or one part I love how they incorporated it is actually physically within the film itself, which is when they're all watching Halloween and the music from Halloween that they're watching is now being the
actual score for the film.
Yeah, as the killer's walking around the house. Like, that's the kind of referential shit I think is really intelligent and smart and fun. And it's worlds better than what we see now, which is just lazy. Oh, these people will recognize this. We'll give them the 3-second joke or meme that does it. It clicks off in their brain and then they can move on and it's entertaining or whatever you want to call it. This actually has something to say about all of the things that we know and love and constantly reference. And that's the big difference for sure.
Yeah, well, because that's just it. Is I think it sometimes does get looked at as just, starting and popularizing the sort of smart ass winking meta reference humor. And obviously Williams' script, is full of references and characters drawing attention to the fact that they've seen movies and that they're in a movie. Mm-hmm. They even talk about and even make decisions based on that. But there is a huge difference between the way this has been interpreted and ingested now, which is, I got that. Look at that thing. That's a thing that I know. And movies now operate almost as a movie trivia IMDb section rather than here is a movie that is about these kinds of people. Here is a movie that where it's, it's built not just into the text, but it's built into the form of the movie. There's thoughtful, intelligent deconstruction on display because Craven is really good at what he does. And when he approached it, I loved watching interviews with him because, obviously, I just love him as a filmmaker. He's a very inspiring figure to me just because he's a very soft-spoken kind of Baptist kid who is basically freed from the way that he views it, his own repression via movies. He kind of has a similar backstory to filmmaking as Paul Schrader, which was that, his family didn't let him watch movies. He was told that they were basically the work of the devil. Right. And he didn't get into watching movies until he was older. And when he did, he basically ran away. And he was like, dude, these are fucking amazing. And we've talked about him before. Like, we've talked, The Hills Have Eyes was actually our very first episode. And I chose it because it was one of those movies I went to the video store and I was intrigued by the poster. And I was like, man, I got to watch that at some point. So Craven was a huge gateway for me into film, which was why it was the subject of our first episode. And since then we've we've mentioned Last House on the Left a couple times, and we did cover People Under the Stairs as well. He's throughout all of his films, the thing that's consistent is that he always found ways to do genre exercises that were also commenting on things that he was seeing, whether it was about his religious upbringing and family dynamics being tested through violence, which you literally see in The Hills Have Eyes. Or, his Grindhouse era was definitely very angry and focused on American vulgarity. And then his more expensive 80s and 90s era, he started to get a little bit more playful and stylish and testing out ideas of dreams and reality and, scary manifestations of things like bubbling under the surface of suburbia. Like that's where you get Nightmare on Elm Street. Right. And in the 90s, he got into he did actually New Nightmare before this, which is also another, piece of full metafiction before he made this. It was like literally what if the dreams, that were conjured up on the screen, like Nightmare on Elm Street, had a life of their own? What if they had an industry around them? What if movies could actually fucking kill you? Yeah,
and it kind of has, and it's not like, it's not much, but Scream 3 out of all of them reminded me most of New Nightmare, just in the sense that they start to incorporate, the Hollywood machine as process. Well. Yeah. But that's besides the point. We'll get to that. But yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
But yeah, like just paired with his sort of, his upbringing where he was basically told that, movies were this forbidden thing. He went to college. He watched his first movie. He literally started making pornos first because it was what he could get work doing. And yeah, there's something to him about movies that are they were forbidden, and which is why he's kind of drawn to these darker, more upsetting stories, these stories that kind of have bad taste to them a little bit. Yeah. And there's something that watching him talk about Scream is really fascinating because he basically said that when he first read it, you're right, that he was kind of like, this is good, but I don't know if I see my angle in it yet. And it took him a while before he figured out his angle, and he eventually decided on, so what got him to commit to it was choosing the angle of that this is obviously Kevin Williamson is someone who's grown up on horror movies, and he's written a story about people who grow up on horror movies. He knows what he's writing about, and he decided to kind of, be like, well, what if, again, the premise being that someone begins to murder people in this town, and in ways that are, of a similar style and genre to the films that they have seen, literally using techniques and situations from the film. And he went, okay, what if that was like translated into stylistically, like a feedback loop is how he describes it. And it's literally like characters know what they're in. They can sort of anticipate what's coming next, maybe anticipate how to survive. And also this idea of kids' sort of perception of violence when it's this artificially constructed thing for their entertainment that they're watching, versus when you are actually in that thing and it's happening to you. Honestly, he beat Michael Haneke to the same idea of essentially funny games, which was literally the idea of done a little bit more pretentiously what if movie characters who experienced movie violence were like actual people that you spent time with.
And there's also no escape with funny games. I think that like Wes definitely with this one wanted to I think give the innocent people in the film a more of a fighting chance, and I understand it's a different commentary, I guess, than what they're saying, but I do like that it's more about like Sid overcoming this past, and especially as the films go on, she just becomes like stronger and stronger, as opposed to the complete nihilistic view that Haneke does with funny games, which I love both of those movies. But yeah. Well, I just know that, it really clarified it for me listening to him talk about it, because he basically was like, the thing that got him to do it was receiving fan letters from kids who loved horror films. And he said that he had kids telling him that they really identified with Nightmare on Elm Street, and it really got into their, these kind of feelings they have about adulthood and reality. And he saw this as a gateway to talk about, a new generation of kids who were literally grew up watching these films, were informed by these films, and how that might further affect their relationship with reality. So it's like Nightmare on Elm Street, but instead of dreams, it's like literally these kids have just watched movies. Right. And this is a film with characters who have ingested so much make-believe violence on screen. And it's basically made for people who have done the same. People, sick freaks. Like us. Like us. Exactly. But I think that how he incorporates that stylistically is the thing that really just makes this film fire on all cylinders and really makes the film, hold up still today. Which is that this is a film that telegraphs to you everything that it's going to do, with the knowledge that you probably know where it's going on a minute sequence level with its kills, with its plot. There's literally a line halfway through the film where one character says, "The father's a red herring, it's Billy." Yeah, which is the film, which is literally the film telling you what's coming. Yeah, and I think it's Randy that says it, who is the film expert. Yes. So it's if anyone you're going to listen to, it's supposed to be Randy. And I like that Jamie Kennedy plays him like hysterical a little bit, like he's kind of like yelling in the video store, for instance, when he's talking to Lillard and saying that he thinks he suspects Billy because look at him, he's being accused of murder and he's over there flirting in the horror section. Who would do that kind of thing? I like that he plays him a little bit hysterical, just because then, even though you know that you should be trusting Randy as the film expert and this is the type of movie we're in, there's still a little bit of you that's like, well, maybe that's too obvious. So you start to kind of like, you just kind of start to question yourself because of Wes Craven's awesome craft. So it's like, even though he's telegraphing everything, you're like, well, maybe this, maybe that. Randy is suspecting him too much. So it's too obvious. And I really do like that he's still able to telegraph everything. And by the time everything is revealed, there's still a heavy impact because they've done so many subversive twists by that point. Like they do because of the two killers, for instance, there's a way in which they can constantly subvert your expectations. So it's like, whenever the killer pops up, well, we'll just have Billy pop up directly after. But now later on that it was
literally
Lillard,
the first and most obvious suspect in the film is the person who it is.
Exactly.
In the end,
he's the guy. They not only that they do the they stab Drew Barrymore, leave her body mangled, like intestines falling out of her stomach. She's hanging from a tree, whatever. Cut to the next big pop-up scare is Billy coming through the window. So it's just like it's such an obvious
the movie is telling you.
It's telling you right
it's
away.
Billy.
And
the movie screams at you like 5 times it's Billy, and because of the power of the filmmaking itself, there is still a constant sense of doubt and danger about it. And I think that is a big part of it, because this is literally a film about overdosing on violence as entertainment. Like, these kids have watched it a lot. I mean, what is Billy? He comes in and relates their relationship through the window. He said that he was watching The Exorcist, which got me horny and thinking about you. Yeah.
It reminded me of you. I love this analogy though, because he starts to say, and what was ironic too, when I first watched this movie, I'm almost certain I watched it on cable. So when he had
you
this
were watching
line,
the cut version too?
Yeah, so he was saying these things. He's like, it reminded of our relationship because it was on cable, so all the good parts were cut out. And so and he's directly translating it to their sex life, as if because they're only making out and over the
they have a PG relationship when he wants to have an R or an N17.
And one of my favorites is when he's like, we were at a 14A rating on our way to an NC-17, and then like just the way that he kind of directs you with the language, like we were doing 14A stuff on our way to NC-17. There's just such it's corny and cheesy, but it's really fun, and it's constant. Like there's dialogue like this throughout the movie, and this scene in particular though is very funny. Them watching two teenagers compare their sex lives to movie ratings.
TV
funny.
Cuts of horror films.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
stuff.
well, because that's just it. This is not just characters, but a film that it knows the patterns, it knows the rhythms, it knows the rules. And the thing that is so exceptional about that is that despite the fact that, again, it's telling you everything in advance, it's taking at face value that you also know the patterns and rhythms, but it's being like, what if you did and you had all that information, but you still found yourself in like mortal danger anyway, because movies just have a raw, visceral power to them. And there's something I think just that's kind of both scary and sad about, knowing that something is coming and it's still just hitting as hard anyway, that there's nothing that you can do about it, that the movies are going to keep repeating themselves, that horror movies are this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of expectation and delivery. And whether you know that or not, you're going to get a blade to the gut, that kind of experience. Yeah. And I think that that's really the key to the movie, that despite all the gleeful, misanthropic, voyeuristic stylizing that's impeccably done by Craven, that even if you don't even buy into the movie as a clockwork, buy into the meta aspects, it really is just a clockwork piece of suspense machinations as well.
Oh yeah,
half the movie is one long horror set piece that took them like 20 days or something to film. Like, it's stupid.
I mean, the opening itself with Barrymore is unreal.
Yes.
Like, I guess
one of the ultimate
mic
mic drop openings to like any film. And it basically says up front exactly what it is. It's, for me, it's like 10 of the hardest minutes of the,
it's nuts.
of a horror movie ever.
Yeah, it's so good. It's one of the, I think one of my favorite openings of all time, not even just in the horror genre. I just think it's so to the point and so perfect and sets the tone so well. And the writing itself is so much fun. I mean, like, Barrymore is great. She's just a natural talent. And to have someone that's, you know, at her status be so brutally murdered in the first 10 minutes of your movie is a very ballsy thing to do, and very impactful. And just, it also, I think I read that they did it in a sense too, so that people kind of had this mindset that anyone was able to die in this movie. Like, if we're going to kill off Drew Barrymore, right, we could definitely kill off Jamie Kennedy or whoever else. So that I really liked about it. But just the aspect in general of using all these different references for horror movies, like When a Stranger Calls, for instance, like the calling of the phone. You could also, I guess, argue like Black Christmas has some phone call stuff in there too. There's elements of just that kind of classic stalker slasher thing. I'm not sure if this is the first movie that did it, but I love the line of when she's on the phone and he says something like, "Oh, I love your blonde hair," which is something he could only say if he was looking directly at her.
I think he says, "I want to," or he wants to know her name, and she says, "Why?" And he says, "I want to know who I'm looking at."
Right.
And then she goes, "What?" And he says, "I want to know who I'm talking to."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
so creepy, like the little sort of like wordplay and stuff that they're doing throughout it. And also just a beautifully anamorphically shot.
Oh, yeah.
Like the widescreen frames, the steady camera moves throughout the house, the building of tension, like slow details, like the sudden cut to outside the house where you get the sound of the wooden tree swing set rocking back and forth, which you will find out later why it's happening.
I love how open concept the house is too, and there's a ton of windows, just because the moment that she gets the phone call and it starts to get a little sinister, your brain automatically starts going to the background, right? He's obviously watching her. Something has to be going on. Someone's around the house, whatever. So I like that a lot of the shots are just her constantly moving throughout this home with a lot of empty space. And eventually they start using it by having the killer physically move very fast, which I also really like throughout this movie. The killer isn't doing that like stoic, very, like, he's not a juggernaut. He's not just like walking around and taking people out. This guy is actively sprinting at people and falling over things at times and even getting stuff thrown at him. He actually takes quite a bit of damage, which I also really enjoy. Kind of adds to the satirical elements a little bit. But there is a lot of creep factor in just watching the background, and you'll see his black ghostly appearance just kind of go really fast across the screen, and you just know something's going to happen, because he's also the type of killer that isn't, except for maybe near the end of the third one, he's the type of killer that if he's in your presence, you're dead. Like, it's not that he has a real danger to him when Ghosty's on screen. Whereas some, you could feel like there's an escape that's possible. Besides Sydney, you really don't feel like anyone's going to get out of any situation that he's involved in. So, there's a lot of really good aspects. To this opening scene.
And the opening scene in particular is just really, really strong. Like there's creepy little details like we were just talking about, like some of the wordplay details. But then, when he really turns on her, and like at first they're just talking about kind of like scary movies, and they're talking, he's kind of flirting with her a little bit, and she's kind of like,
love his voice too.
Yeah, his voice too. Yeah, played by what's his name? I have it written here.
Roger something.
Roger Jackson, who's played the actor and the voice throughout most of the films. And apparently he basically never met the rest of the cast because Craven didn't want them like having a relationship with him. He wanted them to just be this creepy disembodied thing that they were hearing.
Oh, that's cool.
He actually was talking to them on the phones during all of the scenes, which is not something they always do. A lot of the time they'll just like have them do the lines into the phone.
Right.
But he actually wanted the legitimate reactions to the thing he says, like when he all of a sudden is like, "Hang up on me again and I'll gut you like a fish," or whatever as he says. Like he wanted those like really genuine reactions to moments like that, or "I want to see what your insides look like."
Right. Yeah. And I love, like, his voice is cool because he has this way of being kind of composed and sounding normal in a way, and kind of honestly cool. Like, I like his more normal down voice, and the way that he uses kind of like this, I don't know, like rasp as he starts to freak out, like when he goes from 0 to 100. It's
when
so
he goes
good.
to Unhinged.
Yeah, it's so creepy, and I do kind of believe, like, I like his voice because it works with Barrymore at first when they are doing the flirting thing. It kind of works. He's got that creepy, sinister vibe to him, but you could kind of see why Barrymore would be like, oh, okay, who's this guy? And then it just gets completely animalistic and crazy. But yeah, just a lot of really good design work on Ghostface himself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the fact that they immediately incorporate like the movie trivia thing. Like literally, she, in order to live, she has to play a movie trivia game on Name the Killer, and because she knows the movies. And yeah, he gets her on a trick technicality question about Name the Killer and Friday the 13th, and you know she's like crying and screaming and freaking out. And God bless Drew Barrymore, she looks terrified. And you know, she ends up saying Jason, but as you know, as most people like us who are weirdos would probably know, Jason actually doesn't go full Jason mode
until the sequels.
And he doesn't even get the mask until what, the third one?
The fourth one? Yeah,
third one. I think
the second one he has like a fucking bag over his head. And then the third one he finally gets the iconic hockey mask.
Yeah, so it's actually his mother, Mrs. Voorhees, who's the killer in the first one, and as a result, her boyfriend gets completely disemboweled on the near the pool. And I love even just the bits where she like turns the lights on and sees him there all tied up and squirming, and then the voice tells her, you know, we got to play this game now. So she has to like turn them back off and like leave him there, and then you hear the sounds of him being killed and everything like that, and
that's
her
creepy
being chased
too.
around.
The fact that they don't even show that boyfriend death, they show the aftermath, but it's just the lights off, the audio of slicing and screaming, and or I guess for him it's just like loud murmurs because he's covered with tape. But it's just that almost adds like a more terrifying aspect to it because you just don't. You know what he's capable of, but you don't see what he's capable of. And there's something about that that's really creepy. Yeah. No, definitely. I also like the popcorn smoke that fills up.
I was going to say, like that's one of my favorite details is that she's making stovetop popcorn when he first calls. And then as the sequence goes on, the house starts filling with smoke and then fire. And because obviously it's been left on the stove while she has been preoccupied by this killer who's terrorizing her. And yeah, the fucking like the shot also of like the reflection of Ghostface like in the glass as he breaks through and attacks her, and then the big slow motion stab on the lawn, which has become like a really, really iconic shot, obviously. And also Craven apparently had to fight tooth and nail with the MPAA to keep it in because he just straight up lied and said, I don't have other coverage of that kill. I need that one of him on screen, the knife plunging into her chest.
That is iconic, man. Like it's just, I think it's because it's so, like a lot of the time they're using like camera angles to kind of get away with the stab, but that one legitimately looks like she's just taking one to the chest. It's very visceral, and I'm glad that he was able to lie and get it in because it's very good. I also like
he
the
just straight up lied to them
of like how even after that iconic stab, she actually doesn't die right away, which I often forget about.
No, it's a slow death of her like crawling and trying, but her windpipes have been crushed while trying to yell at her parents. It's horrifying.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like she could have been killed right there, taken to the tree, still would have had a lot of good impact. But that last desperate moment of her seeing her folks and them not being able to hear her just because he fucked up her windpipe, it's just that added desperation and scary quality to it. You know, it's just like it's she was so close to getting help, and I think that's
her
where it's
body
terrifying.
being dragged across the lawn, holding the phone as the parents are listening to her dying breaths.
Oh yeah, good lord! And you know,
and then they find her strung up.
Yeah, and the mother's reaction, just like, not my baby, not my baby.
Yeah.
Like it's so Oh my God, it's so. This is the part where you don't feel the satire. You know what I mean? Like he starts a lot of these scenes with the satirical elements, but the moment that knife comes into play and the violence is being enacted, it is pure horror, pure terrifying. So I love that aspect of it.
That's what I think. I think ultimately that's something that gets missed a lot when talking about Scream, this first one especially, is that I think that sadness is an underrated element of the movie, and occurs not just in like the tragic backstory stuff that deals with Sydney, but also metatextually with this idea of like the sadness of these horror tropes repeating themselves even in a knowledgeable, technological, modern world where everyone's desensitized to it.
Right.
Like here is a girl who has seen every movie and would never have expected to be a character in the movie and reckoning with being that character in that movie, right? And it's just, you know, it's not just like absurd or funny. It is legitimately scary and legitimately sad when it eventually happens. And that is something that I think is just like sort of like the perfect line that the movie has to walk. And I don't think every sequel totally pulled it off.
No.
But I think this one, you know, it is what makes this one sort of hold up in the ways that it does.
Yeah.
But moving into the central stuff, obviously we already talked about kind of like the main cast that's working out here. One of my favorite details though is how much the kids are just kind of like assholes and how like actually desensitized they are and stuff. And like when they first find out about this murder, they're running around like wearing the masks, like being creeps to each other and stuff like that.
Like 2 days later, it's not even like a couple months have passed or something like that. They're like, oh, you remember Jennifer? Yeah, let's make a bunch of pranks based on her timely death. It's like
they're literally joking about their friends being killed. Matthew Lillard is being like, live her alone.
yeah, exactly. Well, while also, you know, sticking his tongue out and making like really funny facial gestures, like being cartoonish. So you can just tell that he's completely detached as a character from any of the death or violence or emotional ties. It doesn't really feel like he has any. Even they mention like him kind of having a thing for Sid even before the iconic ending scene. And they kind of almost imply that the only reason he's with Rose is because he couldn't get with Sid. And so I think that brings some complications to it as well. They don't dive much into it, but it's just furthering the idea that these characters are kind of, besides maybe Sid, pretty selfish. And even though they're aware, I think that those kind of toxic traits are what ultimately lead them maybe to their demise sometimes. Mostly, I guess, with Billy and Stu, but.
Well, and I think there's something that they're trying to get at a little bit with that, like obviously the engagement, how often these people have engaged with, you know, make-believe violence has to them, I guess, you know, it's supposed to be a little bit like the idea that, it's something that's just kind of common and talked about now, you know, because we've seen it so much in movies.
It's not that they deserve it. It's like that. It's that they are just so desensitized to a point and so uncaring that they don't, at a certain point, see it coming exactly for them. And I think that, that's what I was really trying to say.
Yeah, they're kind of approaching it with like a jokey attitude, like we're not in a horror movie.
Yeah, it couldn't happen to me. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and then the whole movie is a slow reckoning with obviously like that is what is exactly what's happening. Like, and I mean, I love even just. I love just like the basic dynamic of like, you know, even when Sid gets her first phone call and it's like Scary Night right out of a horror movie or whatever. And the idea of her, like, you know, again, in these really amazing anamorphic steady cam shots, just walking around the place, and the basic dynamic of having him, the killer, kind of like sonically in your ear, but visually you're with her point of view. And you're constantly moving around as she's investigating and she's looking at places. She's looking at this space that someone could kind of like pop out of. And, you know, she's even like sort of challenging him on the phone because she's like, you know, I've seen these stupid movies. I'm not like a dumb girl who's going to run up the stairs. She's literally like calls his bluff when he says that he's on like the front porch. And then he starts talking about how he's going to like kill her mother, which kind of like freaks her out. And kind of, you know, she's definitely the more sort of mournful, sensitive character because she's actually had violence directly done to her family,
right.
And her mother.
Yeah, she's the one not making jokes about the murders.
No. Yeah, but
I think this is the one of the big scenes though too that introduces like how much damage Ghostface is going to take as well, because like Sid really fights him off. Like it's a pretty long sequence of him chasing her through the house. And then I also like that she has that kind of makeshift lock because she's like not allowed to have a lock on her door. So what she does is she uses her closet door to lock her entrance door.
Yes.
And it's just, I don't know.
Which is a great moment because it comes back in Scream 3 actually, which we'll talk about.
Right. Yeah. And I just like it on kind of just this innovative teenage level. Like she's formed her own sense of privacy, even if her dad wasn't going to allow her a lock. And then to incorporate it during this horror sequence when Ghostface is chasing her, and that's the way that she kind of separates her from him for a brief moment. Just really cool stuff, and I like how it telegraphs that with the dad in the first scene, trying to get into her place while Billy's trying to have sex with her.
Yeah, well, and it's very logistical, like suspense filmmaking, where like characters are constantly like making kind of micro choices on the fly in the floating camera work, and some of it works and some of it doesn't, and honestly, part of that is what makes how kind of like cheap the Ghostface costume is kind of scary in a way.
Yep.
Like, cause you're constantly watching that motherfucker get like kicked in the nuts. He's falling downstairs. All kinds of things are going wrong here, but it's obviously not stopping him from, continually pursuing, because that's just what happens in these movies.
Yeah.
So no matter how realistically they try to kind of like fend it off or use their knowledge and actually work their way around him, like he's still a force.
I like the way they use the mask in this scene too, because they have that part where, she escapes Ghostface and then Billy comes up right away, which is, I guess, that first kind of moment where you're like, oh, well, maybe it's not Billy because he's already here and he doesn't have the outfit
and then
all
the
that.
Phone falls out of his pants.
Yeah. And then I love when she starts running away and opens the front door and Dewey is holding the mask but in front of his face, and so it kind of freaks him out a little bit, but freaks him
scared,
too.
Yeah.
I love Dewey. We can get to it in more detail, but Dewey's just like naivete, but also trying his best to be a hero is a great character.
Yeah.
And I think David Arquette was perfectly casted for that. He has so many good moments, but yeah, that scene in general, that ending is very fitting for both like Dewey's character to be scared as well, but then it's just a really good choice on Craven's part to end it with the mask. Have it be separated from Billy, but then still have a little bit of suspect things happen, like the phone. It just starts to complicate things, and your brain starts to go like, well, the timing doesn't make sense with Billy, but it just seems so obvious. And as it unravels, it just gets better and better.
Yeah, I think the way that Sydney puts it is really like the best, which was just like, they're like, do you really think it's him? And he was like, he was there.
Yeah.
It's like, who else? Like, he was the one who was there.
Right. Exactly.
And even the cops are kind of like, do we really think Billy did it? He's like, you know what? 20 years ago, I would have said not a chance. But, these days,
these kids,
you never know. Yeah.
Another thing I like with just speaking on foreshadowing is when, and I didn't notice this for whatever reason the first couple times I've seen the movie, but the part where the two pranksters are in the mask and they're in the principal's office and they're both in it, and he's just like, scolding them for whatever. That is directly telling you there are two killers in the movie right there. And I just thought that was kind of interesting too. It's not as obvious as anything else, but I can't help but think that's exactly what Wes is doing. I mean, he's got two guys in the mask they're both the culprits of the prank. It just feels like a really fun little foreshadow to the ending twist.
Yeah. Who is it? It's Henry Winkler.
Yes.
Henry Winkler
Yeah.
is playing Principal Himley, and he's like
plays a
wielding the
psycho.
scissors. Yeah, and he's yelling at the kids for.
Threatening
He's
them.
like, he was like, we should string you up for the heartless, desensitized little shits that you are.
Man. He gets
yeah,
a cool shot
and-
too with like the ghost face in his eye as he's being stabbed to
Yeah.
death. That was pretty cool.
That the reflection of Ghostface in his eyeball, and all the different ways that he kind of like scares himself with all the different mirrors, and he's wearing the mask, and because they're a lot of the school, the high school kind of humor of it is kind of funny, because like you get that, and also some of like the idyllic kind of like small town photography like together kind of give you this very these chiller vibes that don't actually exist in the movie, because then you get the kids actually experiencing these murders and kind of mocking it and making fun of it and things of that nature. You also get like crazy scenes, which in retrospect are never exactly play the exact same, of like Billy being like, you haven't been the same since your mother died.
Yeah.
I think it's time that you got over that.
Yeah. The scene in the hallway.
Yeah. Great scene.
Yeah.
That's always, which is like
also-
performed on its face, like at face value, but is, has kind of like this sharpness to it, I think, by Williamson.
Definitely. I also think the part directly after that, when she goes into the bathroom, is very funny. I like that Wes has the cheerleader type give off this almost like academic theme about how Sid would become a homicidal maniac. It's like her way of expressing
Teen
herself.
suicide is out, and homicide is a much healthier therapeutic expression.
Yeah, that's so good. I thought it's so funny, and I love that that Wes has like one of the cliched popular high school girls give that diagnosis. I think that was just very funny, and
yeah. Well, and what's crazy is that basically at this point in the movie, he kills. They shut down the school. They put a curfew in place, and the kids immediately say, "Well, hey, no school, curfew, party time." They say pathos can have its perks, so they say let's just have a great time. And literally, the second half of this movie is a set piece, which is fucking crazy. Every time I rewatch this, I'm always so impressed by that.
And I love that Wes finds a way to incorporate more. Like, he's got all these twists and kind of, subversions of the horror genre and directly referencing things. But the one thing that I like that he adds to kind of modernize it a little bit, and also play on this thought of somebody watching a movie, is when he does the 30-second delay between the van and the house.
So good.
And so you have these scenes where it's like Jamie Kennedy, for instance, has his iconic scene where he's explaining all of the rules to Halloween and horror slashers in general. And then you get that scene, and I love that scene. But then directly after that, you cut to the van where they're watching it,
and they're watching that scene.
Yeah, they're watching the beginning of that scene, and the one camera guy just goes, "This is boring," and then just like turns it off for a moment or something like that. And I just like that it was a little joke almost on the scene itself. Like the news guy was not interested at all in Wes Craven's movie, that kind of thing.
And also the way that it doubles up the idea of, again, these are people who are voyeurs, people who are watching. Like literally, this guy is watching the same sequence we are on a TV, like we are, right?
Absolutely.
So it's so kind of not just in the writing clever, but in the actual way that he shoots it. Like it's very clever in that that way.
And he uses it too in a slasher sense later on when he realizes like they see the killer on the tape and they're like, "Oh no, we've got to go in and save Kennedy or whatever." And they open the door, and the moment they open the door, they go, "Oh wait, the delay!" And then boom, big like throat slit. He's already at the van. And you even kind of forget for a second just the way that he telegraphs it. So it is still shocking and surprising. And Wes Craven just loves his buckets of blood. Anytime somebody gets their throat slit or anything like that, you have these.
Oh, it just pours.
Yeah. Like the shot of the van, the footstep just being like overrun by a blood waterfall, basically, it's unreal. So. Yeah, really good stuff.
Well,
right
and my favorite detail in that is that you have Jamie Kennedy is watching Halloween on the couch, and this amazing anamorphic Dutch angle shot where you can see him fully laying down on the couch and the killer in the full doorway walking his way in behind him.
Yep.
And he is screaming at the TV.
What's he screaming?
Jamie, look behind you.
Yes.
He's behind you, Jamie. He's literally yelling at himself.
Dude, it's so good. I lose it every single time. And it's so like silly and simple, but you know that Wes Craven like thought of that moment. It was like, yes, just absolutely, like best casting ever. This really worked out. Because that is such an iconic joke. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's so good. And then obviously this is also the first moment where he's using the score from Halloween as the diegetic score for what we're actually watching.
Right.
And then,
so you have all of this
they're watching. In. Yeah, and then you cut to them in the van screaming, behind you, like, behind you, kid. And like,
which is like what we're doing. You know, we're like, Jamie, behind you.
Behind you.
Yeah, it's great.
Literally, there's like 3 or 4 layers of look behind you going on.
Oh, my God. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, like that stuff's really incredible. Obviously we talked about it briefly, but the sequence where Rose McGowan gets killed in the garage is like,
she's so good in that scene too, because she's just got such a like attitude to her character. So when she's delivering all of these very silly but fun,
you want to play psycho killer, and he's like, he's like nodding. Don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
Oh my God, I love that. Even Ghosty is like kind of getting cute with it a little bit. His nod when she asks is like, so funny. He's like, yeah, I do. Oh, man.
What movie is this from? I spit on your garage.
Oh, good.
And so to play up moments like that, and then to have that sequence end the way that it does, where her head in a full prosthetic is just smushed by that garage door, crushing her face, and the sparks are going up, and her body's hanging there. It's like,
and then the shot of Ghosty
really
just
brutal,
like sliding into the house,
slinking away through the door. Yeah.
It's like hilariously horrifying. It's such a strange way this movie makes me feel at times, because I am legitimately scared of Ghostface or whoever's embodying him. But he's still funny. Like he's still, the way he moves around and the way he still plays with characters is still very playful and teasing in a way. So
yeah, well, because I think that it creates like a little bit of distance, both the humor and obviously all the meta aspect stuff, where it's like, so aware of the fact that it is a movie and that you are aware of all of its patterns and rhythms and everything like that. Like that just inherently, I think, creates a distance, pointing out the fact that you're watching a movie. And that's just it. The fact that it can do stuff like that and also pull off, her head getting crushed and you being shocked is like amazing, that it can do both of those at the same time. Like I've never seen anything else like do that or do it in the same way that this does it. Like it's really, really crazy stuff. And like the immediate thing follow up to that is Sid having sex with Billy, and the way that they're talking about it is, she's talking about sort of like, her mother kind of, she's scared that she's going to turn out like her mother, and, she's going to get killed, and everyone calls her mom a slut because she was kind of sleeping around and on her father, and she thinks that she's going to be a bad seed. And Billy immediately goes, "You're kind of like Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs." You keep having
this is how
flashbacks.
I talk to all my girlfriends too.
Yes.
They love it.
And she says, but this isn't a movie. And he's like, sure it is. It's all one great big movie, and you can't pick your genre. And she's even saying like she would rather be in a Meg Ryan movie because like, you know, it would just have less violence to it, or a good porno.
Or a good
I think
porno.
she says.
Yeah. And he's like, what kind of movie are we about to go in? But it's I also like that this breaks the trope, which is what Jamie Kennedy establishes in that awesome scene where it's like
the sex
you
equals
can't have
death.
sex, you can't do drugs or say I'll be right back and all of that stuff. And so what they're doing is kind of like, okay, you have Sid. Also, another subversion kind of is they don't normally, at least in the speaking on traditional slasher rules, they don't usually have the lead actress have sex. They usually have like another two supporting roles or whatever, just so that they can murder them. So I think it's kind of cool in that way too, that it's almost like her doing that. Whereas from Billy's perspective, being the film freak he is, thinks that this would be her wrapping it up, right? It would be like she has to die now because she's broken those laws. But what she's really doing is kind of breaking that rule in a sense and making it so that it's breaking the cycle of tropes. And I think that's also in a way why Jamie Kennedy is allowed to live. But I'm just making excuses at this point. But I do like that thought. I do like that thought.
Yeah, no, it literally, it's absolutely what it's getting at, because they even cross-cut him saying, here comes the obligatory tit shot with a cross-cut with like Nev getting undressed.
Right.
And so like, you know, she is directly courting, you know, the rule that is going to confirm her death and then overcoming that. So it's like the one sort of optimistic aspect of the film is that there is one character who actually does break the rules, whereas like most of the other kids are kind of resisting against them, even though they know them and like it's not working. Right. You know, they're still ending up really gruesomely killed. They're having their heads crushed. They're being stabbed to death. Yeah. They're being like the principal gutted and hung from the goalposts.
Yeah, I love that all the teenagers are like, let's go play with the body. Like
let's go pry him before they pry him down. Yeah, let's fucking go. We're in the middle of
this giant party, but like, let's go to the football field and poke the dead principal with a stick. It's just so funny.
Yeah, like that stuff's so dark and so mean. Like the sense of humor that it has in those moments. And yeah, but then we get the big final sequence where Billy is seemingly killed by the ghost-faced killer, despite the fact that Nev is kind of still suspicious of him. I think it's because of a conversation where she has, you know, who did you use your one phone call on? And he's like, I called my dad, even though in the police station she saw the sheriff call his dad, and he was just like, he's like, what do I have to do to prove that I'm not a killer? He's very, very whiny about it. But Ghostface comes in and kills him, which is like the second time where they go, you thought it was Billy again, but it's not Billy.
It's not, we promise.
He even wipes off the blood with the hand.
I love his like turn to Sid too, and it's just like, Sid, and then dies. It's also fun to watch that in like when you watch it again, just because you know he's acting at that point.
Yes.
So that's
so good. Fun. Like being aware of the fact that the characters are also putting on a performance and like drawing, like doing this like construction, like they are actually directing a horror movie for the other characters in a way.
Yeah. 100%.
That stuff is all so cool on rewatches. Especially as, you know, Nev Campbell is like running around this great house set that they built. I'm assuming it's a set because it's like really intricate, but possible it's just a real location. I'm not sure. But like great wide shots of the exterior of her like on the second floor, like pounding on the window, or her falling off the roof and landing on the boat in front of the garage and seeing her best friend's head crushed in the garage door.
That's the thing. He maps out the house in such a great way.
The geography is so
how characters
like,
stumble upon
planned out.
Bodies and get to a certain point because they were at another point in the house, and so that they can meet up eventually. Like he's really well thought out.
That shot when Dewey opens the front door and he's kind of like walking towards them, and then he falls over, and you can see the reveal that the knife is sticking out of his back.
Yeah, I also love the that same shot when Ghost walks over him, and it's not even because what you're focused on camera wise is Sid running away, but what you can still see unfocused is Ghost take out the knife and then do his awesome his hand wipe that he does with the blood, and you see it, but it's unfocused and in the background, and there's just something about that I found really terrifying too.
Yeah, it's that stuff
like
is all really strong. How he's just like, you know, and it is like in this first movie especially, I think it loses the magic a bit in the sequels. In the first movie, it really does have this like anyone is going down like kind of aspect to it. Like you have no fucking clue if Dewey is going to make that or not. Like you're just kind of like, holy fuck, he just got stabbed in the back, or when characters get shot, like when Gale gets hit too, and you're just like kind of losing it a little bit. And the way that it's all been really, you know, expertly constructed, and the way that it moves around the house, the way that the camera moves, it's really, really fantastic stuff, like next level. Yeah, and this is also when Sid starts to kind of suspect almost everybody. Like there's no one that she's trusting in any way, shape, or form, because even Jamie Kennedy comes up after, who's still alive, and he's like, both you assholes, or whatever she says. Like, pointing the gun at both. And I love Lillard's this is the start of his completely unhinged performance that we see in the finale, and he's like the way that Wes is shooting this part where it's Sid and Jamie and Stu, is it's a back and forth from basically point of view. And so you see Lillard trying to express that convince her that Jamie is the killer and he's the innocent one. Yeah. But he's so over the top, and he's already doing his like spitting and sweating because he's been killing all night, most likely. And so he's delivering it to the camera, and he's like got his hands out towards the camera, like, come on, Sid, give me the gun. It's okay. Like he's just going insane. And I think honestly, it's probably not the move that Stu probably should have done, because she was even more freaked out. Closes the door, and then we start the big old reveal of Billy and Stu and all that. But I love Lillard's which is a great initial presentation there. This does still have my favorite like twist ending to any of them, because I think the other ones, they get very self-consciously ridiculous because they know that you're anticipating a twist now. Which I think can work. It doesn't work as well. The second one I think is definitely stronger in that twist, even though it's still a little too silly for me, but I do like aspects of it. Whereas this one feels completely in line with the tone, with the movie. And it feels really on point. And I love that it and Billy doing the little we all go a little mad sometimes from Psycho. I was just gonna say, and that he has to also go Psycho 1967 Alfred Hitchcock or whatever, like he like starts reciting every little detail about the movie. Very funny. Just the fact that this is two film bros that went into serial killer mode. It always reminds me of like this ending when it's Stu and Billy. It's just like if we went completely unhinged after Sleazoids like departed or something like that. You know? we would just choose more obscure movies. We would be like, have you seen the John Cassavetes The Incubus? That's how we're gonna serial murder someone. So no one take that. No one take that. That's ours. You know what? If they're, I don't think they will be, but if they're ballsy enough to pull that in the fifth one, that would actually be so fucking funny. If they do Film Bro again, but they do it in like really obscure horror really movies. Obscure exploitation films. That'd be so funny. Anyway, oh my god. Yeah, no, this big finale where they reveal that it was obviously Stu and it was Billy, and they're both like really unhinged, and they planned it based on, you know, all of their experience watching movies. And there's a little bit of, you know, I think they said that they were undecided the way that they were going to go it, where there was two ways. They were thinking no motive, which is really scary, or they were thinking that, you know, there should be some sort of construction to the way that it kind of played out. Yeah. And they opted for both. So they opted for Billy is very upset about his his mother breaking up with his father, which happened because Sydney's mother had an affair.
Right.
And so also broke up kind of like his family. And I think they say it really cruelly too. They say your mom flashed her shit all over town like she was Sharon Stone. But let's face it, Sid, your mother was no Sharon Stone.
And the open hands as he does it.
Yes. No, Matthew Lillard, amazing in this stuff.
I could talk for like 30 minutes and just reiterate every single thing that Lillard does in this scene.
One of my favorite ones of his, which is they say that this is all part of the game called Guess How I'm Gonna Die. And then she says, fuck you. And they said, we already played that game. Oh, yeah. Obviously implying that they had sex. And Matthew Lillard gets a great line following that where he says, come on, Sid, you want to play? It's a fun game. It's called Bukai and you die.
My favorite one. This actually got the biggest laugh out of all my brothers because I watched this with both of them. And it's the line where he actually calms down for just a second. And it's when he's on the phone and he's kind of like, it's at the point where he's been stabbed because they're stabbing each other to get away with the murder. Like they were defending themselves.
Which is so good, by the way, and so dark that they're literally being like, we're going to make ourselves the lone survivor and stab each other. So it looks like that, we were almost killed as well. But then the performances start getting woozy from like the blood loss.
And they're going too hard. Like they got too into it. So they start stabbing each other more angrily. It's really good stuff. They're just too unhinged at this point. But why this line, I think, delivers so well is because he's so crazy loud and over the top throughout this entire finale. And then when the I think it's Sid, when she's on the phone and hiding in the closet, she says like, so what are you going to tell them? What was your motivation? And he says it with the most sincerity ever. He's just like, peer pressure. I'm way too oversensitive. Dude, we were laughing for like 10 fucking minutes because he says it with such sincerity, almost like it's the only thing that Stu actually believed this whole time. And I love it. I think it's hilarious. And then of course it leads into like a more over the top line, but obviously iconic, where he's just like, my mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me.
By the way, apparently improvised by Lillard.
Oh, you God among men. God damn it. Why didn't he get an Oscar for this? He deserves it.
They were in the zone.
Dude, he was
in this entire sequence.
Holy shit. And I don't want to take anything away from Billy. Billy is really good too. It's just that because Matthew Lillard gets to do the unhinged thing, it's just more obviously entertaining. But I do like Billy's kind of like bad boy, dark demeanor, Johnny Depp thing that he's doing too. That it is very good and very fitting. It's just that you can't help but love Lillard in the middle of all this chaos.
No, because he's just really going over the top in a way that like really perfectly matches like the
entire twist the sort of scene and the unraveling.
The loss of control that the characters are experiencing as they are like seeing their plan to like frame her dad for on the 1 year anniversary of his wife's death and
come
kill
to fruition.
Sid. But Billy does get for me the thesis line of the movie, which is the sick fucks. You sick fucks have seen one too many movies, and he said, "Don't blame the movies, Sid. Yeah. Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative."
And that's something that's like I don't know if Wes was. I can't imagine that he was like preemptively defending himself with this movie because he's done plenty of other horror movies and there's plenty of other slashers out there. But I did find it interesting to read that there were actually a couple copycat murderers that were directly related to this. Now, I'm not arguing it's the movie. What I would argue is that these kids were probably going to do something anyway. They saw Scream, and just like the movie theorizes, it just makes psychos more creative. But I did find that interesting when I looked up some of the controversies of the film. The fact that there were like a couple sets of teenage dudes that were like, "Yo, let's get a mask and fuck some people up." Like, so pretty wild.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting, and actually we'll talk about it when we do jump into 2 and 3 here, because there's a part of 3 that is actually sort of affected by that aspect, but they were definitely very playfully using it here, since the basis of the film obviously was that all of these characters have grown up, and it's maybe affected the way that they sort of perceive their reality. They perceive it through construction. They perceive it kind of through movies a little bit, which really, really works when in like the last bit here, you get like Billy watching Jamie Lee Curtis on the TV, hiding in the closet from Michael Myers. And then you get him opening the closet and getting stabbed by the umbrella by Sydney. And then literally even better, fucking to me, like one of the most genius moments in the film is, Sydney dropping the TV on Matthew Lillard's head, on the TV it's Jamie Lee Curtis like holding the knife as if the knife is about to go into his face while the TV falls on him.
Yeah, so good. I always had a thing for you, Sid. Yeah, great. But
that that stuff is again it's really simple stuff, but it's really of a piece with what the entire film is doing, and how this whole set piece has so many little visual creative details and things like that is on top of its really, really clockwork construction. And also, this ends up going to a bunch of different, places where they end up killing him. They end up killing Billy, and then Billy, they're like, this is where the killer is going to come back to life, and they execute him like straight in the head. Not in my movie. Yep,
love it.
But then you also have Gail, who has kind of like helped them out of the situation. The journalist who has become like really involved, and Courtney Cox has a very interesting performance because
I like her.
She's playing very kind of like bitchy, which apparently was like because she was super popular for Friends, it was they actually passed on her for the role until she said no, I really want to change up like the kind of image that I have, so I really want to play someone who's kind of like got this kind of darker edge to them. And there's something so dark to me about how even in the victory of this film, where they have killed all these people have died obviously, and they come out and they stop the mass killing. And you just get her immediately, still covered in blood, reporting it on the scene, being like, okay, let's take it back to 1. Come on, move it. This is my big shot. Those are the last lines that you hear in the movie.
She goes it.
Yeah, again, it's this entertainment industry that surrounds death is like still chugging along the same way that like
even when
directors are still making movies about it. Yeah,
that is fairly dark too, and it still adds. I think it's because Gale Weathers is such a, and in a sense they all have elements of like cartoonishness. I think it also still balances well with the satirical element of it too. Like after all this shit, it is kind of darkly humorous that she's still like grabbing the camera and like, let's report on it. Oh man,
yeah.
So yeah, really solid. I really love this movie.
Yeah, me too. We should pivot to reductive rating round, which for me, this is just one of my all-time favorite films, just in general.
Yeah.
So this has to get the 5 for me. This is a movie that obviously was a huge gateway into getting into genre films and paying attention to what it is like a director actually does with the camera, and like hearing characters talk about other movies and actually going and watching those movies. And the idea of a movie in conversations with an entire history of movies and genre was just a concept that like blew my mind. And again, not just characters like saying the names of movies on screen, but like an actual filmmaker playfully engaging with the patterns and rituals of the quote unquote scary movie. Like this is honestly, this is the original damn my life a movie for real kind of moment. And I think that there's something so interesting about how Craven is at once he's gleeful and violent and voyeuristic about that and kind of mean in a way.
Oh, yeah.
But I also think that the movie is feels really sad about that, because Craven literally was getting fan letters from kids who grew up on his movies and who were saying that, they were cathartic and scary kind of at the same time. And he wanted to provide a similar experience, or at least a gateway to that experience. And
I mean, there's even more
There's-
hope in this technically than Nightmare,
Yeah.
because Nightmare ends with Freddy taking them all to Dreamtown. So
Yeah. Well, and with this too, though, I think there's the added element of, again, like all of these kids are on a journey to navigate, a world where they're being awoken to the idea of death as something that occurs in it, which is obviously very scary, something to be afraid of. But this film in particular, it's like now we're also being introduced to, there's an industry around death that you are being locked into a feedback loop with, not just in the case of like, you ingest violence for entertainment, which almost every character in this movie does in some capacity. But like also, then all of a sudden you find yourself in visual sequences where those things are then happening to you. And when it suddenly transitions into a suspense set piece, like it's very gracefully filmed. The chase scenes and the cutting, they are the way that, we are locked into what the character can see versus what they can hear, constantly walking around with the phones. It's like modern technology and attitudes that present this idea of like distance or desensitization, or kind of like this, again, these modern characters, but finding themselves shocked by these very old school methods of something as simple as like, again, being just stabbed. Cold steel piercing a warm gut is the way that I kind of describe the visceral impact of when this goes horror movie mode, because it does have that shock to it, that shock factor, which is just crazy to think about, because again, the movie explicitly tells you at every moment exactly what it's doing, and it is built and constructed around the idea that where it's going. So just so many really brilliant gestures, like finding ways to have characters watch each other like they're in a movie, like with the delayed camera, or have characters experience things that they've already referenced before, or even think about their own lives and their emotional lives in the context of a movie, like the idea of an edited for TV relationship, or wishing that you were in a Meg Ryan movie. And then finally, kids who plan their murders based around entirely what they've seen in movies, like literally looking at other people making art and being like, what if we killed people and it was artful?
Yeah, don't they have a line where it's like art imitating life, imitating art, or something? Maybe it's the opposite of that, but yeah,
I think that's a conversation they have in the second one. But same idea,
right.
And then finally, literally a TV screen playing Halloween being like used as a weapon, and the music being diegetically used, like as Dewey walks around being freaked out by the Halloween score because he's literally in a sequence from Halloween. Like that shit is just, again, it sounds kind of simple and stupid when you just say it, but there's so much formal complication to walk that line and pull that stuff off that it really does blow my mind. And also worth noting, this movie was shot by god of the show, Mark Irwin, the dude who shot The Fly, Videodrome, Scanners, The Brood, The Blob, New Nightmare, Freddy Got Fingered.
Nice. That's
Throw
awesome.
that last one in there.
Hell yeah. It's a good movie.
Yeah. And the fact that, once again, it ends on a 45-minute long single set piece that is absolutely amazing. It took them 21 days to film it. They said that they filmed it 21 days straight, from the time that the sun set to the time that it rose. They did overnights.
Wow.
And they said that after it wrapped, the crew made T-shirts that said, "I survived scene 118."
That's awesome.
Like that stuff really, really all just really, honestly, really incredible stuff. And I think about this movie a lot, and I find that, for a film that is about overdosing on violence as entertainment, characters who have done it, viewers who have done it, the movie itself doing it, I think that this is surprisingly, both effective as the kind of movie it's trying to be as a piece of entertainment, without sacrificing the fact that it is actually about something. And honestly, even though I do appreciate funny games, the fact that it did kind of get to similar ideas without having to make
like,
it, I guess, as painful or horrible of an experience.
Yeah.
It's just like, like this movie found the tragedy and pain and sadness in that, just by what Craven was able to do with the camera. He didn't even need it in the script. He was like, I just have this idea and I know how to translate it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You know what? I think I'm gonna 5 it too. Actually.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's getting that upgrade. This is probably my shit. I don't even know. I feel like I've seen this like 10 times over my lifetime. Honestly, it was one of the first horror movies I ever saw, and it's interesting that it is. I think I did mention this in the beginning, but it teaches you everything you need to know about the at least classic slasher. And so by the time I got into watching all of those classic slashers, I was like well established in the rules already, so I could kind of see things. And I just think that that's pretty interesting that a film is able to do that and able to recognize such formulas and patterns that it actually works. Like it applies to the films that you go back and watch. I remember one time, for instance, this would probably been a few years after I watched Scream for a couple times, and I was just really starting to get into like any horror that I could possibly get my hands on, even if it was like straight to DVD bullshit. And me and my buddies were watching this. I don't even remember the title of it, honestly, but it's based in a ski resort of some kind. And it's a very typical slasher, but in a ski resort. It's from like the late 90s, maybe even early 2000s, but it doesn't try to do anything different even after Scream comes out, which I thought was interesting. But as the film was going on, I was just calling things out. I was like, oh, okay, that's not the killer anymore. I just literally applied Randy's rules of engagement to the movie, and I called the killer
Randy's rules of engagement. That's what they should call the book.
That's right. Of horror engagement. That's right. And so by the time the movie wrapped up, I called the killer in the first like 15 minutes. I was saying who was going to die and who was going to live, and I was completely correct. Now we're talking based on a completely generic slasher, but I just find that interesting that he's just got such an understanding of these movies that he was able to make me, a 13-year-old know-nothing, be able to engage and watch these movies in a different way before I'd ever seen any of them. So I think that itself is just a testament to how well directed and how well educated, I guess, Wes Craven is within these genres and just filmmaking in general. He's just such a control over the satirical elements, balancing it out with the horror elements, which I found, especially given some of the lines that these characters have to deliver, I found would probably be very difficult for anyone else to do, but he does it flawlessly.
Yeah, there's honestly stuff in this, like stuff that we've even mentioned out loud, that honestly sounds like it would be moronic.
Oh, yeah. Ridiculous. Like really, really dumb. And he found a tone that balanced both of those things out while making a commentary on horror slashers, on the entertainment industry and how the audiences interact with horror slashers and just killing on screen in general.
The tragedy of an audience filled with bloodlust, even in the first place, like wanting to see that kind of stuff and like loving it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I love that he dives into the second one, especially in that opening where everyone's just like, screaming at the screen and stabbing towards the screen and stuff like that. But it's just without his masterful understanding of the horror genre, no one else could make this. I guess at the end of the day, that's my big review. Nobody else could make this movie the way that it is and could ride that very fine line that the dialogue gives him. So, that 5 out of 5. I do think this is a masterpiece, and I just, it's a formative movie for me. So I love it.
Yeah. Me too.
And Matthew Lillard's a god. Again, I'm just putting it on the record for the 10th time.
Incredible performance. He should have got so much more work out of this.
I know. He's so good.
All right. Well, I think that will wrap it up for Scream. We're going to be right back, and we're going to do a single segment on both Scream 2 and Scream 3.
Big boys, Manson, Bundy, OJ.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Showgirls. Absolutely frightening.
Gail, Dewey, whoever, call me back. I can only hear myself.
I only hear you too, Sydney.
I am not dreaming. I am not crazy. He was there in Woodsboro.
It's not Woodsboro, Sydney. Looks like Stab 3's back in production. You gotta be praying this movie keeps going.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Scream 2 from the 1997 American slasher film directed by Wes Craven, and also Scream 3, the 2000 American slasher film directed by Wes Craven. The thing I'll immediately start with about this is that I do think that these are both good movies.
Yeah.
But I do think that what I said I love so much about the first one is a little bit less pure here, which I think is just sort of something.
It comes with sequel franchising, I think, right? Like it's.
I think it's just something that naturally was bound to happen. Like for me, it's just again the whole thing that makes Scream special is the feedback loop aspect that Wes Craven was describing in his style that he was very self-consciously implementing,
right?
Which was this very basic idea of these characters are characters who have seen a steady cam chase sequence of a woman being stabbed and now are in that exact same kind of shot.
Right.
Whether you're aware enough of the movies to actually sense that that's what's happening, or whether you're just enjoying how well done it is, that was, it doesn't matter because both ways it works. But that was definitely what made Scream, like there's kind of like a magic in a bottle, quality to that. And you can sense in the writing and construction a little bit, starting with 2 and especially hitting in 3, just a little bit more kind of looseness that I think just kind of cheapens the effect a little bit, even though there are still some really playful stuff and some really cool stuff that Craven is doing. He still gets some really, strong set pieces put into both of these films, but you can tell that both of these films were basically immediately greenlit off the success of the first one, and they already did have a treatment kind of like pre-written, like when
I'm imagining, like the second one.
He had a treatment written for the second one and also a treatment written for the third one. Actually,
okay. I was the third one always felt to me like an afterthought compared to 2. Like when I was watching 2. I did notice some differences in quality, but I could still tell that he was still pretty much locked in that kind of satirization of both the audience looking at a sequel and the horror elements. But I do think that as these go on, with 2 and 3, they also do become more generic slashers, which is strange. In a little bit, moments. Now, not more so in the third one than the second one. I think the second one, for the most part, is pretty strong, even when it kind of develops more of the character stuff with Randy and Gail and Dewey and Sid. But I do notice a little bit more of like them really forcing it. I guess that would be it.
Yeah, because there is definitely this quality that is lost where, again, we were talking about how dangerous that first one feels.
Yeah.
That it's like an anything goes kind of experience to watch. And you can definitely feel now that they have found their own kind of rhythm and formula that you don't think that they're going to really betray. And so definitely when you're watching the second one, which kind of actually provides a little bit of intrigue just in like that's exactly the kind of commentary they were providing for the first one. And now they're kind of falling victim to it themselves a little bit. But there's still stuff that really does work. And Scream 2 takes place, I think it takes place like a year or 2 after the first film. And it has a lot of the same surviving characters. It has Sydney, played by Campbell. It has Gail, and it has Dewey, and it has Jamie Kennedy's character Randy. But now they are at a college in Ohio where they are targeted by a copycat killer who is doing the doing basically the exact same thing that the killers in the first one were doing, but now they are being inspired by not just the movies. What if they are being inspired by the events of the first movie, which is also being turned into a movie? So there you can see them kind of adding you know, like it adds satirical elements about the basic idea of like cash grab sequels and how they never live up to the originals, and they've kind of found their own repetition and formula, and even a movie industry out of the events of the first movie.
Yeah,
so,
and they do have a funny conversation about sequels, which I will say, I think they were just kind of keeping the titles they were saying to a more, I guess, generic audience with the sequels that they were mentioning. But I do like the initial conversation and the thought of it. Just like,
they were like sequels and inherently are inferior to the originals. And people are being like, well, you know, Aliens. Well, you know, T2. You just have a hard on for Cameron. I think one of them says at one point. What's cool about this is that this was a sequel that was basically almost as successful as the original film was. And I guess it's worth noting, we didn't get to mention it, but like the effect that Scream had on a 90s audience was monumental.
Oh yeah,
at the time, until Halloween 2018 came out, it was the highest grossing slasher film basically ever made.
Wow.
It was shot on like $10 million or something, and they ended up grossing like over 250 or something stupid.
That's wild.
Maybe not. Maybe it was closer to like 200. I can't remember exactly, but it was a stupid amount of money.
Yeah.
And so I've heard, because I wasn't old enough to be seeing Scream 2 in a theater, but I have heard that as a result, the like Scream 2 box office and people there on opening weekend, it was like the stupidest thing in the world. It was fucking packed. It was like imagine going on opening night and seeing the opening sequence of this in a theater. And
that would be wild.
Like, just really would be, especially too because, you know, this is the opening to Scream 2, I think, is another one of Craven's strongest set pieces that he's ever done.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
And because basically he went, okay, so how do you top one of the hardest opening sequences of all time with one that's somehow almost as good?
Yeah, almost.
Which is just Wes Craven going Anguish mode, which is the 1987 film that we talked about, where there's like a killer in a movie theater, and like the screen violence is creating like this hypnotic trance for the audience and everything. But you have Jada Pinkett Smith and going to the premiere of Stab, which is the movie based on the events of the first film, and everyone's there wearing the Ghostface costume and being handed fake knives, and she's literally being like, it's some dumbass white movie about some dumbass white girls getting their white asses cut the fuck up, and like she doesn't want to be there, she's not particularly into it. I also love the full recreation of the opening of the first film. That they do. Heather Graham is playing Drew Barrymore. Yeah, and there's shots of the crowd like throwing popcorn at the screen, hooting and hollering as she like drops the towel because they think they're going to see her naked.
I also like that Jada's character is like really turned off by the whole thing at first, but then you do see her at one point kind of settle and sit in it, and I don't think she's enjoying herself, but I do like that Wes is kind of having her still be engaged, almost as if like, even if you don't like these kind of movies, I bet if you sat down and watched 10 minutes of them, even if you don't like it, you would kind of engage with it just because it's such a visceral genre of filmmaking.
Yeah, people like going to horror movies because they like to just be like, go with someone else and like jump a little bit, you know?
Yeah. So I like that she starts to sink into it a little bit. She's still uncomfortable, but she's kind of
even though she's shouting at the screen, what does that have to do with the plot? Her being butt ass naked.
Yeah. And then she's like yelling like, turn around, like that. Basically doing the Jamie Kennedy
Star
thing.
69 his ass.
Yeah. And I also love that the energy from the audience is just insane throughout the entire thing. It's not like, you know, the credits start rolling and everybody's up and cheering and stabbing and screaming or whatever. They're like 10 minutes into the opening sequence of Stab, and they're still hooting, hollering, never shutting up, just screaming, punching their knife into the air. I was just like, I couldn't help but think it would be, I would say, like very fun to be involved in that audience. But at the same time,
you definitely would not be watching that movie. Like it's like
5 minutes.
Like you're not getting the experience. You got some dude screaming in your ear.
Yeah, like 5 minutes in, you'd be like, all right, that's enough. I get it. You liked Well, you know what actually is wild?
This is also the first movie.
Is the first one. I just contextualized that within my brain there. You're right. It's the first one. So they're already stoked based on it just being around a murder. So that's actually even funnier. I for some reason, I never put that together.
Yeah, no, they're literally just doing an exaggerated, like insanely exaggerated audience hype reaction to basically just get into exactly what we were talking about, which is that the first film is designed in a way to be watched by people like that, people who know all of the patterns, people who know the rituals and are like, oh, she's taking her clothes off. Oh, the phone is ringing. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that even across all these films, but especially that first one. Man, when that phone rings, it's fucking piercing. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's a great moment in the second one that I really love where they even sort of reference that quality to it, where Sydney hears the phone ringing as she's like leaving, and she's like drawn to answer it. Like she knows who's on the other line. You know, you could just not pick it up, but she's like literally there's like this huge push in on the phone, huge push in on her. She's like, nah, I got to answer that phone. She's just like metaphysically drawn to it. It's like hilarious. Yeah. But then you get another really great, you know, again, this opening sequence has great steady cam maneuvers throughout sort of like the theater lobby. I love the lightning effects on the movie that are freaking people out. Jada's boyfriend goes into the stall and thinks he's like hearing people like making out in the next stall or something, and he gets a knife through the ear. Oh yeah. And that, which is just really brutal. I love the way that they film it too. So it's like he's got his head right next to the wall. And, you know, they show the ghost stab him, and what they do is have his head like pop out. And then when he does, the blood just like pours down, and you just see the knife sticking out at the end. And it's just enough for your brain to kind of connect it all. It's very visceral and gross and awesome. Yeah, and then watching Ghostface like literally put on his clothes and sit down next to Jada Pinkett Smith while the movie is going, and you know she's starting to get into it. You know, she's starting to be like, "No, move! Don't do that! Don't do that!" And she's like, "If that was me, I'd be out of there." Yeah. And, you know, she starts literally hugging the killer, who she thinks is her boyfriend, watching Graham get stabbed in the iconic shot that the MPAA wanted cut out. And then she finds the blood on her hands and she gets stabbed, and, you know, she starts screaming, and they're all like, you know, her cheering. Screams and her death is being muffled by the sounds of the crowd reacting. Yeah. And literally the killer gets up and stabs her like 8 times while the crowd is just like react, because other people in the crowd are also pretending to stab people. So they're like, yeah, whatever. They're just putting on a show. Yep. Yeah. And I just realized too that kind of like the use of the mask and all of that. Didn't they do that in one of the Michael Myers movies where he like Halloween? It's a little different because he like switches out the mask for somebody else, like an innocent person. But I just thought that was kind of cool. Maybe a subtle reference. I don't know. Yeah, because in Halloween 4, I think that is the one where they establish kind of like the community aspect where like people are aware of Michael and they like sell masks at like the store and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but Jada going up to the stage and just like screaming, the projector light shining on her as she dies in front of everyone as they finally realize like what it is that they're seeing and hearing. And they're like 300 people just watched her die. And I think they say at one point that they thought it was a publicity stunt. And Randy just says the multiplex is a dangerous place to be these days, you know? Like that's just the way it goes. And by the way, apparently the whole like stabbed as many times as she was and like the whole slow walk and bleed out, this was apparently Jada's idea. Oh, nice. That's awesome. You know what? Because I've heard that Wes actually incorporates a lot of like the actor's ideas in his movie making. Like he's, you know, he'll listen at the very least. Because I heard that Jamie Kennedy, when he eventually, unfortunately, dies in this one, he kind of was talking to Wes about it too, because he felt like, and I think he's right, Randy's a very iconic Scream character, so he's gotta go out with a bang. And I think they were actually initially going to do the off-camera kill that Jamie has, and then Jamie insisted on like having the super bloody face shot of his body afterwards and stuff like that. So it seems to me that Wes is actually very open to working with
the actors and kind of open to ideas, which I think is a positive
Yeah.
thing. So, yeah.
Well, and a lot of stuff, especially with this one, was that because it was kind of so hastily greenlit, because they were kind of like they were like, when they were testing the movie with test audiences, they knew what they had. They went, holy fuck.
Right.
Will you guys do this right away? And in order to get Wes to agree to 2 sequels, they actually promised him that he could make like a third film, whatever he wanted, a passion project.
Oh, okay. Do you know what that was?
So it was the movie, I think Music of the Heart or Music from the Heart.
Oh, okay.
He literally just wanted to make a very small drama film about a woman who teaches music in Harlem. That was his passion
so he
project.
Had to do a Scream franchise. That's hilarious.
Yeah, well, and you might remember there's that bit in Scream 3 where the director literally says, "I've always wanted to just make a love movie, but they are a classic love story, but they keep saying you need to make a scary movie first."
Oh yeah. I also
literally that's pulled from Craven's life.
As another real brief reference, or Craven reference, I forgot to mention that they also have that very funny moment in the first one where the principal goes out into the hall and the janitor is dressed as Freddy Krueger.
He's like, not now, not you, Freddy, or whatever he says. Yeah.
So funny, so ridiculous. But anyway, continue.
It's like a moment straight at a new nightmare.
Yeah. I love Wes.
But so Wes definitely, because of the way that these were written, there was a lot of kind of like they were writing stuff and then filming it like the next day kind of deal, because it wasn't like a fully fleshed out script. Kevin Williamson only had a treatment, and they were greenlit within 2 months of release, and they were shooting within 5 months of release.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's wild.
And yeah, so like Williams was still writing when they entered production, and apparently it was a very chaotic and kind of crazy experience. And it's kind of impressive that this film comes off as controlled as it does.
Yeah,
the second one anyway, especially.
I felt like, to me, it was like I felt the writing was a little weaker this time around, but it didn't feel as if it was because they were chaotically rushing it on the spot. So now that I actually know that it comes off as way more controlled than I initially thought it was, in a sense. Like just because I mean, when you say that he was basically making it up as he goes in some regard, like that should be more obvious. Well, yeah, and in the movie, I don't know if you heard too. This was one of the first movies ever to have the experience of suffering from internet leaks. Oh, really?
And it partially
that in the third one, right?
Partially because of the experience of what they had on the second one, which was that the movie had to be rewritten because a leaked script of the second one went out and people knew who the killers was. It was originally supposed to be her best friend and the boyfriend again, I'm pretty sure. Oh, wow. Okay. Because I do like that they have a really great conversation between Randy and Dewey, where it's just them where they say like, who's the suspect and here's why I'm actually not even canceled out of being a suspect myself, which I thought was very funny. But they do even mention, they're like, it would be too obvious for it to be the boyfriend. They can't do that again, that kind of thing. And then they say the best friend wouldn't be an obvious thing. So it's funny that they initially had that as an idea. Yeah, and then they had to rewrite, and they did, for the third one, they did the thing that they even mentioned in the third one, which was that they actually did have 3 different scripts. And they didn't tell, and they actually filmed 3 different endings and didn't tell which cast members what ending they were actually going to do. Do you know if they ever released those endings? I don't know. I wonder if like you got the DVD, curious. If there were like deleted endings or whatever. Alternate endings. Yeah. I'm curious. Yeah, I'd be curious. But I really, we won't have to skip there, but eventually I do kind of like the ending, even though it's a little over the top and silly, but we'll get to it. Yeah, I kind of like both of these endings in different ways. I think the crazy silliness of the ending of the third one is honestly what saves it for me by the end. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, there's some really good stuff in that one. But yeah, the most of the second one, I would say, it is kind of a retreat of a lot of what the first one was already doing. But now they are obviously, you know, they're doing it as
college students.
And obviously as a sequel, having obviously already experienced it once before. But Craven for me really did go off with the set pieces on this one. Like these ones are in a lot of ways just as hard, and in other ways like even more gruesome and gory than even like the first one is. Like the opening, obviously we mentioned, like the literally the death at the stab premiere, where you're watching what looks like a parody of the first Scream and a woman being killed at it. Like that's obviously a crazy idea. But then as this movie progresses, they started adding in, because the movie was so popular with teens, they started adding in sort of like teen cast members, like Sarah Michelle Gellar from Buffy. Is in this as a sorority sister who gets killed while she's flipping through the TV channels and watching Nosferatu. One of my favorite moments is that her friend is jokingly doing the Friday the 13th soundtrack noises over the phone. Or what, you know, I can't remember exactly what it is, but she literally has to say like, stop doing that. Yes, that.
Yeah. That thing's awesome.
So like that stuff's really cool. Again, they're just recreating kind of like the opening sequence of the first film with that one with her, but she gets like really brutally thrown off the rooftop. Like a lot of the kills are still as clumsy and gruesome as the first one and still hit hard. Like they still have impact to them.
Definitely.
It's just some of the character writing gets a little bit more ridiculous in the second one. And also because every movie has to find a way for Dewey and Gale to kind of be upset with each other and then reunite by the end of the movie. Like every single one has to have that happen,
which I think
which
was
is just
supposed to eventually become like a satirical element of the franchise itself. But I will say it gets a little tiresome just because it's like, you know, it is the same thing over and over again. And they are playing with it, but it still is that. You can't really escape it.
Yeah, but there are some moments where the repetition does work for me. Like I do love, again, the sequence of Sydney being drawn to answer the phone, and she just naturally like walks over to it and picks it up, and the killer is on the other end and attacks her boyfriend, and she's looking at him wounded, and like the Twin Peaks alarms are going off. It's like, oh my God, it's happening again. It's deja vu.
I think the scene with him in the cafeteria is one of the craziest, weirdest things I've ever seen tonally. Did you?
It's great.
I see. I don't know how I feel about it. Like I watch it and I can read that I think Wes is having a good time with it, obviously. But
Wes is getting really playful with this whole movie, honestly. The second
really playful. And I appreciate that. I really do. I just think that when it comes to like Sid's reaction, I don't think that she would react that way to like what he's doing in the middle of public. Everyone's eyes are on them. He's doing something incredibly embarrassing. And
yeah, the boyfriend literally stands up and sings "I Think I Love You."
The whole thing.
But he's serenading her. He's serenading her like the scene literally of Tom Cruise in Top Gun doing it.
And it's his way of like convincing her that he really cares about her, and then he gives her his like frat boy necklace, which I like the frat boy necklace thing. I think that was a really good touch. I don't know.
Did you catch it? Did you catch the detail that in the sequel she's still wearing it?
Yeah, I thought that was great because it's one of the like only sincere connections that she has by that point. And so it's nice for her to like walk around, and you can tell that she, in the third one, she kind of like remembers him fondly. They don't really mention it, but she does a lot of scenes where she's like, as she's talking, she's holding the necklace almost as if it's like a unconscious mannerism or something like that.
I honestly think Craven just couldn't hold himself back because Jerry O'Connell, the actor, who is like an incredible, like,
he's good.
He's just like, he's got one of those faces, man, where you're just like, this guy is in like a shitty 2000s bro comedy.
Yeah, he's a frat boy look like crazy. Yeah, he looks exactly like that.
But yeah, and just very, very funny to have him the year after he was in Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise, like do the Tom Cruise Top Gun thing at the same time. I think they just literally couldn't stop themselves.
Yeah.
They
and
were
I
like,
get it. I think some of it's funny. It's just that I think it goes on a little too long. And I do think that Sid's reaction to it just doesn't read to me as Sid's character. But I like the initial thought of it. I think it is funny. And bringing it into this kind of like college sphere, this frat boy sphere is a funny idea. So. Yeah,
well, and I like the way that it ends up, working out for him, where like, she does end up, she has
so
fucking trust issues like anybody would. And he plays it like completely like, how can you not trust me?
Yeah.
And he ends up obviously not being the killer. And even though apparently he originally was supposed to be, which I don't know how that would have worked, that version of it.
I wonder if they would have like done a very similar thing to what Billy said, but they just make that the joke, almost like it's a rehash of the first one again. It's like, this is just what these do.
Right.
Maybe they would have done something like that. I don't know. But
yeah,
I do like that they leaned into a more just unhinged, crazy, chaotic ending that they do. But
yeah, I mean, I like that it doesn't end up being the boyfriend, because you get that great sequence of him like being sort of like crucified on the theatrical stage.
Yeah.
And she kind of knows that her lack of trust in him is actually basically what's going to result in his death and things like that.
Yeah.
But like you also are like completely sympathetic with her experience having to relive all of this stuff again. And not only that, have such crazy chaos surrounding it. Like not only Gail still trying to get the scoop, but also other reporters now in on there being a whole crazed fan culture around it, with like the fact that there's a movie. And I love in the first movie, she says something along the lines of like, knowing my luck, if they made this into a movie, I'd be played by Tori Spelling. And they actually did get Tori Spelling to play her in the parody version of this,
right,
where they do a recreation of the scene with her and Billy, but it's Luke Wilson as Billy.
Yes, it's so good. Dude, Luke Wilson with his like
with the hair, the parted hair.
Yeah. Oh my god! And he's doing like his like macho.
That's the way the cookie
voice.
crumbles, Sid.
Yeah. Come on, Sid. Like, oh my god, I was losing my mind. Me and my brother Shane are huge fans of Luke Wilson, particularly for Old School. We just think he's a really good comedic actor, and to see him incorporated with comedy, honestly, within this horror movie,
it basically looks like an SNL parody of like the first movie almost that they're watching.
That is what, it feels exactly like what you'd see on SNL that week. Very funny. Yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah, and then Randy seeing that clip and going, "I'll wait for video." But yeah, I just like that Craven still found a lot of different ways to get the sort of the thing that we were talking about a little bit in the first one, like sort of the focus on the construction and the movie making into it. Like I do like that, like David Warner as her drama teacher is like trying to convince her to keep doing the Esocles Greek tragedy that she is doing, or whatever it is that she's doing.
Yeah, and, Cassandra, I think, or something.
Yeah, and she's like, the murders in the movie, they're a little distracting. Like, I'm not all here right now. And he's like, you used your pain and your trauma.
Use it for your art.
And she was like, she saw it all coming, the war, the murder, the madness, and she embraced her cursed fate. And then you watch her as an artist, like on stage, like, the music and the lightning and the stage work. And, she's actually kind of partaking in the construction of all of these elements now. And she's like, fate's vengeful eye on me, as she sees Ghostface in costumes all around her, actually terrified. Her fear and, her experiences actually like infecting her performance and her art and everything like that. Like that stuff is all, I think, really strong.
Yeah.
And when Craven gets a chance to like flex with the subjective psychological filmmaking he gets to do there. He does another great one, for example, in the third one, which is one of my favorite sequences in any of the movies. And I wish that there was more of it. And the third one would be a better movie if there was more of it. Yeah. But the sequence, for example, in the third one, where she's on the Hollywood recreated set of Woodsboro.
Yeah, the first one.
And she's literally in like a Hollywood set version of her own house.
Yep.
and she is being chased through it by the killer, and it's not quite like she's getting all these sort of, you know, she's remembering all of these
layout.
things that happened, and the way that she uses the layout, she literally reuses the whole fake lock thing with her doors because she knows that it works. And then there's a part where she's so convinced that she's in her house, she tries to run through a door
up to the attic or something.
It totally collapses. And like there's actually like nothing there, and it just leads to the bottom set because it's not a full house, it's a set.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that kind of stuff where she is just being, you know, she's completely lost the thread on like what's her life and what is a movie version of her life.
Yeah.
And like that, whenever Craven gets to do stuff like that in this series, it's amazing.
Yeah. One of my favorite images from that whole recreation is when she's just, I think it's even before Ghostface starts attacking her, is she's just walking around and she goes and she sees the garage, and they've already put like the blood and all of that over where Rose McGowan's character is supposed to die. And so it's just
when she has to see the recreation of like where her best friend died.
Yeah. So she doesn't see the body because it's just the blood that's left. So it is kind of almost like she's looking at the aftermath of the real crime scene. And I thought that was a really good image as well. And I like the image of like when she does go through that door, and you were mentioning that Ghostface like kind of falls off, that it turns into like a very movie studio stunt where Ghostface falls onto the bed mattress or whatever. Like that's legitimately the stunt that you'd be watching. So I thought that was pretty cool too. He does find some really nice ways.
As the movies went on, you could tell that Craven was getting to flex a little bit because basically each one doubled the budget of the previous one.
Oh wow! So even the third one had more money than the other.
Yeah, the third one was shot on like 40 million or something. It was absolutely the most expensive one. Although I'm convinced he spent half of it on the huge explosion in that movie.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because you know, obviously like the second one you can tell is a little bit more expensive just because of the amount of more like locations that they have.
Yeah,
like they have the big school, but then like he doesn't need to just. Yeah, and he doesn't need to just have the entire last section take place in like a house. Mm-hmm. Like the set pieces that eventually happen in this. Like there's the one on the courtyard where Randy gets killed, where he says that his favorite scary movie is Showgirls, and I was wondering if he was shitting on Showgirls or if he was just saying that movie is genuinely very scary.
Yeah, I am going to hope, Randy, because I like Randy, that he's a good boy. You're going to catch
these fists, Randy, if you were saying something bad about Showgirls.
I'm gonna find out Jamie Kennedy's email, and I'm going to ask.
Yeah, we're going to ask him.
I'm going to be like,
if anyone knows him.
You were Randy, and I think you had the best mindset. Did he like Showgirls, yes or no? And if it's not a yes, then we gotta reevaluate this entire thing.
Yeah, we're gonna kill Randy again.
Yeah, he just, let's say this: if Randy doesn't like Showgirls, he absolutely deserved to die the way he does in this movie. That's what I'll say.
Yes, which is pretty brutally. I do love that he asks the killer if his favorite is the super shitty Splatter University.
Oh yeah,
which is a movie that when I watched this as a kid, I had no idea what that was. And Splatter University is only a film that I watched in like the last year or two, hunting through the Vinegar Syndrome catalog. And man, that is like a movie that like no one has seen, and probably rightfully so because it's pretty bad.
I love that.
So I think Randy was trying to be shitty to him.
Yeah, I do love that he names off like he's starting to name off the high school ones, and he's like, but that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with graduation day, final exam, and he starts naming off all the college slashers to the killer. That was a really great Randy moment. I also really like just the way that the Randy scene, the death scene, is filmed in general, not necessarily his death itself, but just the tension and the suspense that you feel as he's looking around.
Yeah, Gale and Dewey like tackling everyone in the immediate vicinity who has a phone.
Yeah. And just like the open space that he's in, and somehow the way that Craven is directing it and editing it, all these shots together, makes you feel like it's a much more enclosed space than it is, because he's just in an open field, but you still feel like at any moment this guy could be killed.
Yeah.
And it's strange because he's in the middle of public. Like, you shouldn't feel this way. Like, the killer 9 times out of 10 has not killed anybody in front of people because he doesn't want to get caught.
Yeah, daylight in public. Like, it's like, how is he going to get away with?
But he finds a way. And then I will say, I think it's a smart idea to take out Randy in that moment because he is a beloved character. So I think you really feel the impact when he dies. Like I do.
They definitely wanted to increase the stakes because they were like, look, we don't think. We don't want people to think that like every character from the last movie is safe
gonna be okay
because they're fan favorites.
Yeah. And I do like the idea actually of Randy, the horror expert, getting killed. I think that is something that's interesting. I just don't like the quickness of it because it is Randy. And I just felt like he was a fairly important character.
People hated this, by the way. Craven got hate mail about it like crazy.
Yeah.
that he killed that. Well, also just the fact that he killed Randy in general.
Right. That I think is too far. I think you'd have to expect that some of these beloved characters are going to die in the sequel. But I just think that it was very. I love the lead up. I just don't necessarily love the execution when it finally happens.
The way that he's like pulled into the van and it's just like. The van shaking.
Yeah. I was like, I think Randy deserves a little more of a visceral, crazy, cool death. Like, I think he deserved a garage level kill. But it is what it is, and I still think that taking him out that suddenly and quickly does kind of rip your heart out a little bit, and I think that's good. So.
Yeah, I definitely think it has the shock effect that they were looking for, which is that to be like, the original characters are fair game really brutally. I think that's kind of like the intent of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been nice to see him get his, get a head smash or get something,
or like fight a little,
get something big, like that cop. That cop in this movie gets the most gruesome death of like the entire series for some reason.
Yeah, I just feel like Randy deserved to have a fighting chance, like the rest of them do. Like even when Rose dies in the first one, like she's throwing the freezer door at the guy, throwing beer bottles at him. Like she's putting up a fight with Randy's just like, oh, scoop you in the van, you're fucking dead, goodbye. And I just think that he doesn't deserve that. But the idea of him dying is good.
Yeah, and the shot when they do open up the van and they find him all cut up, like that stuff is really. That stuff's really nasty.
He's like
and
pouring
I love
blood out of his mouth. Jamie Kennedy does not look recognizable.
Yeah, I love the pans and tilts where it goes from like his bloody hand on the phone up to his face, up to like the driver's seat where they can see like the killer was there and the doors open and everything like that. Like just, very sort of economically filmed stuff like that.
Yep. Agreed.
And then, they in the second one, they try to throw in more of like the cynical entertainment industry by bringing back Liev Schreiber, who was briefly in the first movie as Cotton Weary, who is the guy who Sid thinks because he was having an affair with her mother is the one who killed her, but ends up being kind of proven innocent. And Liev, you got to give a little bit of credit. I mean, you got to give credit to all of these movies on the casting in general. I think like they were finding some of these actors before they hit it big. Like they kind of knew what they had when they were looking at some of these younger actors. Liev is quite good and quite scary as like just a character who's not a killer, but someone who is scary because he is just very selfish and business oriented in a way.
Yeah.
And he spends half the movie just chasing Sid down, trying to get her on prime time with him so that they can both be famous and make money.
I do like his initial kind of his surface level personality that they give off, because we know of him in the first one as like the possible killer, and he doesn't have a lot of lines, so your brain is just kind of left with thinking that about him even after you see all the chaos at the end, because it doesn't deal with him a lot. But with this one, they start to at least initially have him be kind of kind, like they go up to, like when Gail goes up to Sid for the first time and is like, we're gonna get an interview with you and Cotton thinks that she's agreed to that and didn't want it any other way. So initially you think, okay, maybe this guy's kind of trustworthy, whatever. But then as it goes, his how people are viewing him, his reputation is bothering him to a point where he's becoming angry and somewhat violent in a way. And I like that is slowly dished out so that they can start to create kind of like I guess it's a red herring, like, because he doesn't end up being the killer, but the movie tries to imply that he could be. It does it in a way where I feel like it's probably too obvious for you to really think that in this kind of a film. But but I do at least like
the fact that he's like chasing her through the library, being like Sidney Prescott, everyone's favorite victim, and like
grabbing her.
Like everyone thinks I'm a psycho killer, so let me act like I'm a psycho killer
in public. Yeah, exactly. It's just like it's a little on the nose, but I still think that the red herring works. And then it ends up working really well at the end, where he's still kind of sketch, but at the end of the day, not a fucking psychopath. So I do think it works at the end as well, where it leads.
Yeah. No, the big sort of climactic set piece of this is actually split into like 3 set pieces, which is how you can tell they had more money,
right?
Which is where they do one at the school where Gail and Dewey are both trying to look at all the footage that she's been shooting. I do like the detail of the fact that her cameraman died in the first one and she has a new cameraman.
Yeah.
And he reads the in-universe book and is like, in this book, your last cameraman got fucking killed, and that like freaks him out. I definitely like that aspect.
And I think they say some line too where he was just like, he got stabbed, and then she says something like, he wasn't stabbed, his throat was slit or something like that.
Yeah. He's like, is that better? But I like that they are watching this footage to see if they can kind of find the killer in it, and then they end up finding that the killer has actually shot the murder sequences himself,
right?
Which is a little clever bit of work. And then it also, there's a scare where they're watching the tape and they get a shot of them. They're watching themselves on the TV, which I don't think makes any sense by that current technology, but I just accepted it as like a scary moment.
We're like, okay, Craven, that's fine.
Yeah, well, because it kicks off like what is, in my opinion, one of the great 90s Steadicam suspense tracking sequences, probably up there with Carlito's Way subway station, which I think is my favorite. Like all that use of like amazing anamorphic negative space and all the different uses of the geography as he's like going up and down the escalator and pulling his gun and waiting for a guy to get closer to the foreground and that kind of stuff. Like that's one of my favorite sequences of the 90s in general. And this film, Craven gets a chance to basically do it himself, but inside a sound booth where he gets to incorporate sound design into it, where Gail can see the killer through the glass as he's like coming into the studio area and looking for her, and great wides of her just like narrowly avoiding him, and her in half the frame in the foreground,
and he's
him
in the
other half in the background.
Around.
Yeah, and then also just being completely soundproof as Dewey is on the other side of the glass being like, hey, Gail, what the fuck is going on? And she turns around and can't hear him pounding or can't hear him saying anything. And then he just gets fucking stabbed in the back again.
Yeah.
And you can't hear her...
the screams.
You can't hear her scream or him scream. You literally are just watching this thing and you can't do anything about it.
Craven does this awesome thing where he just sets the camera in the room that isn't where the audio or action is coming. So every time he switches it back, like even when David is being killed and you're on that side to see Courtney scream, you can no longer hear her because you're on that side, and then same thing when it flips back and forth. So I thought that was great too. I also
really
like
clever use of that.
The blood gag in general, because whatever David Arquette had in his mouth was a big old blood pack, because as soon as he gets stabbed, it just huge. It just goes all over the clear window. So it's really visceral, and I think that the use of sound is a really good thing too, because it adds like in my opinion, it adds like an extra layer of sadness to it, because you know that these characters really love each other in some weird way, and I think the lack of being able to hear them even scream is kind of something like inhumane in a way. Like there's just there's no way to communicate right now as Dewey's dying, or supposedly dying. So yeah, really, really good sequence. This is one of my favorites in the movie too.
Yeah, which then moves directly into the cop car set piece, which is also fucking sick.
Oh yeah.
Which is Sydney and her friend in the backseat of the cop car being driven around for protection. And then Ghostface literally like kind of like pulls up and literally starts pulling the cops like out of the car, slitting their throats, smashing their faces into the windshield, just fucking them up like crazy.
Is that the
and
one
then
where
he gets in the car
where the cop eventually gets on top of the car?
Yes.
Okay.
Because there's this amazing geographical detail where the killer wants to get in, but he's blocked off by kind of like that sort of like grate that's meant to separate the people in the back of the cop car from the front of the cop car, so he can't reach them. So what he does is he just gets in the car and starts driving away with them.
Yep.
But the one cop lives, jumps on the top of the car, and as the killer Ghostface is driving a car swerving. It's like action movie shit.
Yeah, it is.
While he's swerving with a cop on top of his car, and he ends up losing control and crashing. And as he crashes, like Final Destination style, a giant steel pole goes through the fucking cop's head and through the windshield of the car. Mm-hmm. And it is disgusting. You see it.
Yeah.
The cop is like literally like twitching with a pole through his head.
Yeah.
And the Ghostface killer is also, he smashes his head so hard against the steering wheel, he goes unconscious.
Mm-hmm. And which leads to
so
a
then
really
the two
cool,
girls are just sitting in the back of the car.
Yeah. And it leads to a really cool suspense sequence that you haven't really seen yet from like a knocked out Ghostface. So that was kind of cool because he's such an unexpected character. So, when they're climbing over him, you really do have that feeling of like he can get up at any moment and just start stabbing them. So I do think they incorporate how you view Ghostface well in that
that moment is so
sequence.
tense. And but then also you get the way the camera focuses on the mask, you get like the desire she has to also just like quickly pull the mask off too and like see who it is like right then and there.
Yeah. And also speaking just briefly on that cop shot as well, I even think there's parts like he's got the pull through his head and he's doing the twitching or whatever. There's little shades or shards of glass that are like in his skin too, as he's twitching, which makes you think like it oddly enough too, the way that it opens up and the way that it's like cracked, like the windshield, it almost makes it look like fencing. So it looks like it's been imprinted in his face in certain moments too. It's just like, it's a really visceral and gross kill. And I like that. It's kind of funny that you're right. A random cop gets that kill. But anyway, that suspense sequence is really good too.
But yeah, the actual suspense filmmaking is like next level, as like that's only half the set piece. The other half of the set piece is literally like the grate has been partially open. So Sydney has to like crawl through it and crawl into the passenger seat and then over the driver's seat and through the driver's window over top of his body. And she can like hear his breathing while he's unconscious. And like,
and then her friend has
it's
to do the
really,
same
really.
thing.
Yeah, and then the girl has to repeat it, which is even just makes it even more tense. That stuff's all really, really strong, and eventually leads to the final sequence, which takes place on the stage, where they literally have like the music for the show playing through the speakers, and the stage has been set. The killer is like shining a spotlight on her and is like dropping production design on her. It's like this big show.
I just realized too that at the end of that suspense sequence with Sid and her friend, when they leave together, the reason that Sid leaves her friend and unfortunately to die, not that she would have known that, of course, but she goes back because she's once again initially curious as to who it is. So she goes back, leaves her for a brief moment, and that's when Ghostface comes behind her friend and kills her. Yeah, well, that I thought was an interesting thought too. But yeah, this production. The stage production sequence is like pretty bizarre, honestly. It goes to
kind of weird.
Yeah, it's a little strange, I think, just because it gets I think it works, but I do think that it loses a little bit of its like sincere slasher horror elements, just because you start to get into this weird stage stunt work where it's like these fake bricks falling over on top of the killer as if that would do much. It gets a little strange, but I think that him working within these like artificial sets is still a really fun commentary. And the overall like double, triple twist, whatever you want to call it, is so over the top and silly that at this point, and silly, like the acting is silly too. Not even talking about Oliphant, but who's the
Timothy
the actress?
Oliphant, who Laurie Metcalf is playing
Metcalf.
Gail like 2.0 or whatever she's supposed to be playing.
Dude, her shot
where she
when she does the big reveal after Timothy has his moment, where it's just like it's the open door. And she just has the gun and she just kind of like pops out with her wide-eye weird psycho look. I lose my mind. Like, I think it's legitimately hilarious. And I don't know.
She's so funny.
I think it's supposed to be. Like, it has.
I think so too.
Yeah. Because like I obviously know that he's playing with satirical elements here. I'm not that stupid. But I just feel like some of her silliness is... Like, I think maybe it's because of what the twist is, that it's Billy's mom. And so you add that to the silliness is what makes me feel like it's slightly disconnected. But then I look at Matthew Lillard.
I feel like the sequence just doesn't...
So I just don't know what... I don't know what it is for me, to be honest. Exactly.
I think it's just that for me, I don't know. It doesn't feel as planned. It feels like they were kind of like, it feels like they did multiple rewrites to get to this twist, and they chose the most ridiculous one that they could think of because they knew that everyone was kind of expecting
everything
twist.
else. Yeah,
I feel like it's just less layered throughout the film. Like when they like the way that they had you constantly predicting Billy to kind of misdirect you a little bit, there's less of that. Like Timothy is hardly in the movie, Metcalf is hardly in the movie, and I feel like it just kind of comes out of nowhere in a weird way that doesn't quite get as, I don't know, I guess quite as scary to me as the first one does. It just doesn't feel as natural. You can tell that
it feels a little contrived for sure.
Yeah. But
I do like
that being
Timothy's,
said,
like I like his initial motive though, like his whole thing,
which is hilarious.
He's like,
I've got my whole defense planned out. I'm gonna blame the movies.
Yeah,
it's genius.
and he's like saying that he's gonna be almost like this is the actual trial is gonna be his movie, and he's essentially like the director and the leader and the writer of it and all of that, and he's gonna be the most popular serial killer, and and in a way be a movie star in his own right. So that kind of shit I thought was like really funny. I love that he also mentions he's like, I'm gonna get Dershowitz as a lawyer and hire like
or
Bob
Cochran
Dole
from the
somebody.
OJ trial. Yeah.
I was losing my mind on that shit. I thought that was very funny. So that's where it started working for me. I'm like, all right, if you're just gonna go like crazy silly, I think that's the way you should probably go for the sequel.
Yeah, so. I think that they leaned into the silliness intentionally enough that this still ends up, like kind of working for me.
Yeah.
Even the whole thing with Billy's mom, because they're literally referencing the opening of the first film with the whole Mrs. Voorhees was the original killer.
Yeah.
So now it's Miss Loomis,
right?
Which is obviously even the name Loomis is just even a reference to Halloween in the first place. Mm-hmm. So like, it's a little contrived, but definitely, still fun to watch, especially Laurie Metcalf's performance, which is like insane. Like she's going super wide eyed.
Yeah.
And I love that when she's talking about her motive, she's literally just like, his doesn't work. She literally shoots Timothy and goes, he was just a means to an end. I found him on some psycho killer forum or whatever, whatever the fuck. And she's like, the blame the movies motive. That guy was out of his mind. I'm not out of my mind though. and she says, no, I'm sane. Mine's just a good old fashioned revenge.
Yeah.
You killed my son. I'm going to kill you. I can't think of anything more rational. And that's kind of creepy line as well. And then you get like a huge you get even more kind of follow-ups of who's shooting who. She shoots Timothy. Timothy I think shoots Gail by accident during that shootout, and then Cotton eventually comes in, just kind of hanging around the periphery of the entire movie, and gets the chance with the gun to maybe take out Laurie Metcalf's playing Billy's mother
and redeem himself,
but only if Sid will go on Diane Sawyer with him.
yeah, that's true. Although I will say at the end, I think didn't that end up being like a ploy for the mother? Because at the end, Sid just kind of gives him the stardom, and he's like, okay, cool.
Well, I think it's kind of left ambiguous whether he was actually doing that for that reason or whether he kind of meant it. And I think that she just
I could
says,
see that.
I'll give you your 15 minutes. Like, there you go.
Yeah, I could see that.
You technically saved the day.
It's definitely
even though you might not have had the best motivation for doing so.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely a troubled character. It's not a easy wrap up for him by this end. I mean, it is. I would agree. I think that there is probably an element of him that might not necessarily help if he didn't get, or he didn't think he was going to get what he wanted. So I could see that.
Well, because he waits so long. He's literally like, I bet you Diane Sawyer interview looking good right now. And then he doesn't shoot until she says, consider it done.
Right.
And then immediately he acts. Whereas the entire time he was kind of like, she's making some good points.
Yeah.
And maybe I could get big with her.
And at the end of the day, I do kind of like that ambiguous nature of it in a sense. Like it could be even a little bit of both. I imagine that he probably would save Sid, but I imagine that he saw this opportunity in this moment and went, well, also I could get something out of it. So I do. Yeah, I think that ending is pretty decent for his character.
Yeah, and even some of the throughout that sequence, the use of like the actual set, like when Sid, the peephole shot of Laurie Metcalf looking through the door as Sid grabs the axe and starts like dropping like the lighting setups on her and stuff like that. Like there's still some cool sort of textual stuff happening here where it's like, Sid is taking control of the stage and the production and, things like that and trying to, get a little bit of control back, and then giving Cotton the spotlight as a hero, even if it's not as white in shining armor as he's about to tell the story. That still definitely fits this whole idea of this violence as a spectacle of entertainment that people kind of take in. And then the movie ends on a Sugar Ray credit song, dating it to the year 1997 eternally.
Love it. Not like the third one. Doesn't date itself at all with awesome Creed
with an
B-sides.
Opening and closing Creed.
I mean, I enjoyed every moment of that, but it doesn't.
One of my
date
favorite
itself at all.
touches is that it's a perfect recreation. We talked about it before. A perfect recreation of Sidney Prescott's childhood home,
right?
But
and there's
it has a Creed poster in it.
Yeah. I couldn't remember. I was like, was there a Creed poster in the 1996 house? I don't remember.
Think so.
I don't think there was. I feel like I would have noticed.
I'm pretty sure it's a joke about how they do like movie tie-in stuff like that.
I think so too, because it's like I don't remember Sidney being a huge Scott Stapp fan.
No, the third one I want to give it some credit is because maybe we should do reductive rating round on the second
4
one.
out of 5
second
for
one
me
gets
on that one.
Yeah, it kind of gets a bit of a lower 4 for me, but still there, still definitely good enough. The set piece is super fucking strong, and even though it gets ridiculous in a way that's still fun and kind of reminds me of like a big Giallo twist ending or something like that. So Craven really went off with the sequencing, even if it doesn't quite have the perfect merging of content and form that the first one have. The violence as entertainment stuff is all still there, and they find ways to stage and construct sequences to kind of like highlight that a little bit, and they continue that honestly into the third one. I think the third one actually might have stronger violence as entertainment elements. I think what the third one lacks is it doesn't quite have the elegant, gruesome set piece impact, honestly, that the other two have. I think that's the only thing that's really holding it back for me, is that it just...
I also feel like the satirical elements get a little bit less impactful.
They go a little far.
Well, it's almost like, strangely enough, the way that the like procedural of it is, I just don't find all that interesting. Compared to the you don't care as much about like the whodunit aspect.
I
guess it's also like they have a lot of scenes. I mean, they have them in all the movies, but they have a lot more scenes I found in the third one of like Gail and Dewey just doing their like figuring it out thing and
figuring out their relationship thing.
Well, their
Which,
relationship,
by the way,
but mixed with the like who's doing this, who's murdering.
Who's doing it, right? Like actually
the
investigating
cops of the crew, in a sense. So
that's true.
I just I don't know. I felt like it was a little drier this time around overall. I felt like the satirical elements were still making appearances, but it didn't feel like subtextually every scene had those elements like the first and most of the second one does. I just felt like I don't know. I just felt like it was a little drier for some reason. I'm not sure entirely.
I could see that. For me, I think the main issue is just that it was very clearly, and we can get into a little bit of it here, but like essentially they found themselves in trouble when they were working on this film with the fact that the Columbine shooting had just happened. And it renewed interest in the idea of sort of violent video games and movies,
right.
Triggering young serial killers in America or whatever that they were talking about. And obviously the films had very playfully been kind of messing with that idea and kind of how ludicrous it is. And the studio anyway, and probably the Weinsteins, they got cold feet about it. And they said that, they were kind of bugging Williamson about it, and Williamson wrote like a 30-page treatment or whatever he wrote, but he was getting bugged and he was busy developing some TV show, and he basically just said like, fuck it, I don't want to take these notes anymore. So they hired this Aaron Kruger guy who got started writing some pretty cool like 90s style thrillers, like things like Reindeer Games and stuff. Okay. But is probably most famous for writing most of the Michael Bay Transformers sequels.
What a kid.
And he had a tough job, which was he was joining this production, looking at the treatment, and also, basically having to take notes from both executives and Craven. Yeah. Because Craven was having none of it. Craven was going, what do you mean tone down the fucking violence? Which was a note that he got. They said up the comedy, satire, reduce the violence.
It's the final thing of a trilogy.
Yeah, Craven basically was like, well, fuck you guys. He's like,
high?
If we're making a Scream film, this is what we're gonna do. And Craven did, I think, eventually end up losing that battle. Not in the filming, he lost it, I think, in the editing process. The MPAA did end up getting its claws all over this, which is why I think a lot of the violence feels very muted in this film, and it was kind of an issue. But as a result, Craven was more involved in the writing process than on previous films, because he literally had the screenwriter's ear, and they were basically kind of co-writing the film together while both receiving harsh notes from the execs, basically telling them to do what they wanted, which is why you get a lot of like Craven's personal sort of isms with Hollywood kind of all throughout the film. Like the director who
that stuff I liked a lot.
The director who is like obviously upset that he can't just make he has to make a scary movie, not just a love story. You get the elements thrown in for stuff that happened during Scream 2, where they are literally, they have 3 different scripts so that they don't know, so they can't spoil online who the killer is going to be.
The killer's following one of the scripts, which is
killer's following one of the scripts, but they don't know which one.
Yeah,
which is kind of like a cool little thing that's happening. And even just the whole stuff with setting it in Hollywood, there's so many cool stuff that he gets to do out of that. Like the girl who is like trying not to get killed, and she's standing in the giant pile of Ghostface costumes, and one of them like literally starts moving and stuff like that. Like that's cool. The cold open in the third one is not as strong as the other two. The one thing even though I do like Leave.
Oh, sorry. The one thing I do like about the cold open is the voice changer that they implement in this, and that's that the killer now can just be anybody, really, just anyone's voice.
Yeah, it really freaks people out.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. Obviously, the technology doesn't make any sense, but like, who gives a shit?
Exactly.
It just adds this element of like, it makes it so that he can. I think that is one part
movie
of the
magic, baby. It's literally the killer is doing movie magic shit.
Yeah, and that's the one of the elements of the whodunit in this that I did really like, because every time that someone was on the phone with somebody and you never saw the actual face of the person on the other line, you could start to think, oh, is this Ghostface just fucking with people, that kind of thing. So that stuff I thought was really good. It created extra red herrings here and there. So that was well done. I thought that was good.
Yeah, and the way it's implemented in the opening is pretty cool, with the killer pretending to be Cotton to his girlfriend, so it freaks the girlfriend out. Then when Cotton actually gets back to his home after doing his talk show that he now has called 100% Cotton, which is a great joke. The girlfriend's like swinging at him thinking he's the killer, and then he can't, yell at her to like look behind her when the killer actually comes in and stabs her and then stabs him. And it's a decently constructed little set piece. It's just not as impactful still. It's just weird. It feels just a little bit more muted than you think that you would expect, even though it still has, the slow walking down the hallways and the steady cam shots and the nice suspense strings and even great little joke moments like the killer playing Creed. So the killer just starts blasting Creed at one point in the house.
That's good.
I would say that I think the Hollywood stuff is the stuff that is the really the strongest about this. You can tell that Craven put a lot of his own time, working with producers now for as many years as he had into this. They literally have Roger Corman make a cameo in the sequence where they're on the set for Stab 3 Return to Woodsboro, where they have an entire recreation of the Woodsboro set, but now in LA. And literally the director and his producers. And by the way, we said last week, where was Lance Henriksen in
there he is.
In Extreme Prejudice? Here he is, baby, in Scream 3. What a great little, tiny little role that I almost wish there was more of him. Oh,
I know. He's so good at playing a fucking dirtbag.
Yeah, and literally they're sitting there going, okay, so, Cotton was about to film his cameo appearance, his shitty death for Stab 3, and I love that he's even on the phone with his agent, like being like, they can't write me a bigger fucking role than what, like a page, and then I die, like whatever, fuck you.
Yeah, and then he goes to die in the first scene.
Then he goes to die in the first scene, yeah, amazing. And then they even have the producers telling the director Roman, violence in cinema is a big deal right now, Roman, with Roger Corman, like the one standing right there next to him. Yeah. And they were like, do we even know that Cotton's death was related to this? He was making a movie called Stab. He was stabbed. So there's honestly, there's some solid stuff in here, and mostly because I guess you just wonder like why it took them so long to get to the Hollywood stuff, because it felt like this just naturally is a good idea, I guess is kind of the thing. I wish it was executed a little stronger. Yeah, but like there is cool stuff and cool ideas with the idea of taking the Scream movies to Hollywood and making it also partly about sickos. They literally make a whole thing about that they do an introduced backstory for the trilogy capper about
with Randy,
Sydney's mother Maureen being an exploitation actor and making like shitty little sci-fi and horror films under the producer, who's played by Lance Henriksen, who it turns out, actually basically invited her to a Polanski party where she was probably assaulted. And to throw that stuff in there, including a line where the Lance Henriksen, sicko Hollywood producer, literally says Hollywood is full of criminals whose careers are flourishing, to a guy named Roman. And this movie was executive produced by Harvey Weinstein. Like, it's just it's an incredible bit of like Craven clearly like, he saw the culture that he was involved in making these films and actually found a way to, somehow sneak it into this film in a way that's like very cutting, actually. Yeah,
I agree.
So that's the stuff that I think really, really works strong about the Hollywood stuff. There's some other stuff in it that I think is a little bit too silly. Like, I think some of the cameos are a bit silly, like the Jay and Silent Bob bit and the Carrie Fisher bit.
The I mean, I'll say this: the Carrie Fisher bit at least just made me laugh because I really liked her "I slept with George Lucas" line, and she's not playing Carrie Fisher; she's playing someone that didn't get the role, and Carrie Fisher did get the role. So I thought that was pretty
Carrie
funny.
Fisher did sleep with her director.
But yeah. I think that was very funny, and just for Carrie to be in on that joke, I thought was just awesome. But I agree that it kind of takes you out of it, and especially the Jay and Silent Bob thing. That thing just seems like completely out of left field. Like we're in a pure comedy now. I just did not quite understand why that was necessary. But the one cameo that I really do love, honestly, and it's not. It's nothing compared to his first two parts in the movies. But when Jamie Kennedy pops up as like this, hey, if you're watching this, it's because I made my death tape and I knew the trilogy was coming. And I think that that really goes well with his character.
That was a clever way to bring him back.
Yeah, I thought that was great because it's like if any of them would have thought ahead like that and made a tape, it would have been Randy. And it's a very believable cameo. So I think that's why it works for me. And just him reiterating like new rules once again, like we already heard him do
anything goes.
The first one and the second one, and now this was what you mean by trilogy. And
you found yourself in a trilogy.
Yeah. So he's like, now the rules, they're completely upside down. Anyone you thought was safe, gonna die. Like all that kind of shit. And then the other one that he says that I also really liked was you're gonna die. Oh, also that now, because it's the third installment and supposed to be the final installment, the killer is gonna be at this superhuman level. So the only way to actually kill him is to like explode him or decapitate him or send him to space or something like that.
Cryogenic freeze and blow him up.
Exactly. Which is I think what they do in like Jason X and shit like that. So it's those commentaries I really enjoyed, and just getting to see Randy again was fun. So.
And I liked them poking fun at themselves a little bit too, because he's like, have you found yourself experiencing unexpected backstory exposition?
Yeah. Is there a lot more dialogue in this version or something like that? Yeah. It's really good, which is funny because that is kind of what I was saying when I was just referencing how I wasn't as intrigued with the whodunit aspect as I was in the previous two. So when Randy comes up and kind of says a couple of the things that I have minor gripes with, it kind of made me forgive them even a little bit. So I think that Randy's implementation was good, and I liked his little cameo.
Although I do think that I do wish that they followed through on the anything goes aspect, because it does feel like the legacy characters were pretty safe in this film.
Yeah, they definitely were. Which I think was odd, because this felt like I was expecting. I mean, this isn't the first time I've seen this, but the first time I was expecting Sid to get through it. Because I don't think it's the type of movie where, everyone's going to die. But I was definitely...
No, I actually kind of like the very last ending that they gave her. Like, if this was it, if this was over, I kind of like the very last scene of the movie, for example.
Yeah, I love that. I actually almost get a little teary-eyed. I'm like, oh, I feel good for you. It's just it's a big sense of relief that she
deserves it.
Yeah, like it's like just walking away from an open door. Like that is a perfect image for her character. I agree. I think that's really good.
And how it contrasts with the opening of her, like, completely removing herself from the world and like having a job at like a women's crisis hotline and things like that. Just like all that stuff. The opening and closing stuff for her character, I think, is decently conceived.
Yeah, I will say this: I don't like her hallucinations with her mother.
Of her
Those
mom.
are bad. Like
it's a little on the nose.
Yeah, it's really because I thought it was going to turn into like a more satirical element of it, because that is a cliche. But he doesn't. He just sincerely has her see like hallucinations, and I don't know. I felt like it was really not good and out of place, and I didn't like it.
I mean, I didn't love the one that happens at the house, but I didn't mind the one that happens at the crime scene when she's seeing the crime scene of her mother recreated in the house. Just because I thought in that sequence in particular, it was literally setting up why she was losing track of what's like a movie set and what's reality.
I agree. I do like, and that it's revealed later that Ghostface has actually somehow used this technology to capture her mother's voice.
In the big mansion, he actually He actually does it and is the one being her mother in the last set piece. So yeah, I agree with you that in like when it first pops up and it's just very sincerely used and not really built up to. It's just like Sydney's trauma, quote unquote, is like all it's doing. It doesn't work quite as strongly as it does the other times that they end up deploying it with like more purpose.
Like the body bag is really good. I do like that.
Yeah. Well, and they set up that the killer is literally the one doing the body bag thing in the final one too. So it's kind of like it's a little bit of both. Like the killer is intentionally trying to get this reaction out of her.
See, that's what it is. It's the fact that like, because that dives into the whole filmmaking aspect of it. Like it's an actual person inside acting this way, doing this thing, but trying to kind of trick your senses a little bit. Whereas when she's doing it in the house and she's just literally having an hallucination, it's like, what are we doing? Like, what are you trying to say besides she's traumatized, which we already know. The first two movies were directly about that. So it's like, I know she, misses her mom and is fearful of the fate that she might also have. But to just literalize it on screen in the third movie when you've never done that before just seems so stupid. So, but I agree with you that later on, I like the way the killer implements it. So, yeah. So maybe they needed that to establish it. I still don't like it though.
Yeah, not my favorite part of the movie, that's for sure. The stuff that I do like about this and that I think is pretty strong, obviously we've already talked about it, so we don't need to mention again, but the big set recreation sequence is like the strongest part, and I honestly kind of wish they maybe saved it as like the climax they like restructured it and like did something bigger with it, where she's like literally doing the whole first movie again almost.
It doesn't make a lot of sense
through like the big party house and stuff.
Like I guess they were just doing like the old Hollywood thing where it was like, here's all these sickos and look who's behind the entertainment that you know and love. But
yeah, that stuff doesn't totally work, but there is some stuff about it that works for me, which is I feel like if the kills were ramped up in that sequence, I would be more forgiving to it, because like I do like the bit where they go into like the Epstein layer and they like have the two-way mirrors where they're like recording the girls that they are like raping, and like
leads to a good action sequence with Dewey and the girl, and he doesn't save her in time. I thought that was good.
Yeah, and also just the basic idea of like all of these characters hanging around the actors who are playing them in Stab 3 and watching them all get killed. Like that's just kind of like a playful idea in general. And I liked specifically Parker Posey as the actress who plays Gail in the movie. Oh yeah, she's amazing. She's so great as like Courtney Cox too. And when they start teaming up and shit like that and trying to investigate together, that shit's hilarious.
Yeah, it is very funny. They're just so like catty towards each other. So it leads to some really fun comedic moments with their characters. Yeah, I agree. She was good.
Yeah, and even Jenny McCarthy, who shows up briefly to play Candy, the girl who's like upset that she's playing the dumb girl who gets naked and dies in the first scene. And I love that she gets her Hitchcock reference wrong. She says, "We've done the shower thing before. Vertigo. Hello."
That's great. I also love that she says something like she starts commenting on like the weird age stuff that happens in Hollywood, and she's just like, I'm 35 and I'm playing a 19-year-old. Yeah, that stuff was really funny too. So yeah, all the writing when it came to directly satirizing Hollywood mixed with Stab and mixed with Scream, very fun. I enjoyed almost all of that. It's just that it's wrapped up in the same formula that we've seen twice before, and with that aspect they're not doing too much fresh shit. So I get a little bored compared to the other ones.
Yeah, I think honestly the big issue is that they made him tone down the violence. I think if the kills, I think if this movie was the exact same and the kills and sequences were as strong as they are in Scream 2, I think that this would be probably almost as good. I just think it really doesn't have something as strong as the opening or the sound booth set piece or the car set piece. I don't think it has anything in here as strong as those three sequences from the second one. And as a result, it does really, you lose the impact, which is what we were saying about the first one. Was what made it. Like the fact that movie is funny and satirical is sort of made actually kind of scary by the fact that he directs the fucking shit out of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's entirely Craven's fault, because Craven's, you know, he still milks some stuff out of this, you know, for every dumb little micro twist in the finale that comes up, the Scooby-Doo ass like secret passageways all through the old Hollywood sicko house is like kind of fun. But it's very clear that like how often the movie cuts away from the deaths, how often it's just quickly over with. You don't see anything. You barely even see aftermaths, really.
Yeah.
It's very clearly toned down to the point where it just feel dulled a bit.
Like, I mean,
which,
you opened the
sucks
first
in a
Scream
movie
with Drew Barrymore being gutted, like intestines flying out of her stomach, and she's being hung from a tree. Like, there's just nothing like that at all in the third one. I was going to ask you, what did you think of the explosion? Because I don't know if I like the explosion. I think it's too much.
Here's the thing about the explosion. This is ingrained in me as a child. Because I remember being blown the fuck away by the sequence when I was a child.
Me too. That's because when I rewatched it now, I was like, oh, I don't know. It felt silly to me this time.
It does feel really silly, and I can't bring myself to dislike it because the build up to it is like the strongest suspense sequence in the film, but it comes out of nowhere, and it's nothing like any of the sequences in the previous films. But
and
the
also
whole bit,
the logistics of it, honestly, is like, I don't know how that makes much sense. Like the timing.
No, it is so stupid.
Yeah.
But in a way that I find hilarious, which is like literally they are being faxed script pages where the killer is saying, I'm outside, and if you come outside, I'm going to kill you. But if you stay in here and read this, you know, you will find out who's going to die next. And obviously I do appreciate how smart Dew and Gale are about it, where they're like, well, the killer says he's outside, so he's obviously not outside. Let's just go outside.
He's a liar.
And the one guy runs back in, and he's trying to read every fax that's coming through. And they said the killer will give mercy to who, until he uses his lighter to read the last bit of text to whoever smells the gas, and it ignites the house, blows the whole thing up. And it's a huge action movie, triple shot explosion. It's expensive explosion.
Oh yeah, it's big.
And I think Craven was just, I think, stoked about the idea of blowing up like a Hollywood house.
He's like, let's do it.
I think that was it. Yeah,
because it's just the thing about it is like, granted, all of these, you know, the schemes and whatnot, if you were to really look at every movie with the physical logistics of everything, I bet it doesn't make entirely
it's all kind of silly in a way, but this is definitely stretching the silliness.
This is stretching my believability, because it's like he has to set it up so that I guess it's not necessarily one person, but also, why would it have to be like there's other sources of light to look at the facts?
Someone could have just had a flashlight.
It's just like, oh, well, luckily I've got this this gas lighter. Here we go. Boom. And then it just explodes. It's like just the amount of thought that Ghostface would have to put into that for everyone to do exactly what he needs them to do in order for that to work. It's just way too like Saw-like for me. And so it's way too over the top.
It is super cartoonishly constructed.
But it is fun.
And
I'll admit.
But it is fun. And and that's it. When I watched it as a kid, I remember once again for the first time, like paying attention to the fact that someone was like constructing a set piece in this kind of way.
Absolutely.
Like I was really paying attention to this. So I remember watching that shortly after I watched the first two, when I was like, I don't know, it was probably even before high school, honestly. Yeah. And just being like, wow, that shit is fucking crazy. But yes, looking back at it now, it's definitely very silly. But honestly, I'll take it over the bloodless deaths where someone just gets like thrown off a house or whatever, like happens in the finale.
And the thing is too, it's like you see people get thrown off houses in the other one, but then they'd cut to the body like laying on the cement. And
Sarah Michelle Gellar is like, she's bleeding out hardcore on the ground when you see that happen. And she actually did that stunt. Like you actually see the full stunt and everything.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, so it just felt weird, and yeah, you're right. It's just obvious that the execs were like, oh, we don't want to get in trouble, so just lower it a little bit. And that's just such a dumb move to do on your third installment of a horror franchise that's known for its kills. Not necessarily its kills, but it's the visceral impact that those kills give. So yeah. It just dumb. Just a dumb decision on the exec's part, for sure.
Yeah, and all because they were just scared that they were going to get accused of like sparking someone to kill someone, which is something they've already been accused of doing, regardless of what they've made anyway.
Yeah, it's like they were already doing that after the first two Screams. I'm pretty sure after the first two is when those like copycat killings started to happen. And so it's like you've already been through it. It's not like it's going to happen. It's already happened. So what would be the reason at this point? Those guys can still rent the first two movies. So it's just stupid, just executive brain.
Yeah, but hey, it wouldn't be a
Scream movie
Weinstein production without a little bit of Harvey Scissorhands getting his way in there. That's what he was nicknamed, because he always used to do that shit to all of his fucking movies.
God.
So, but yeah, the fact that even though the fact that this movie was definitely blunted and kind of harmed by that, the fact that there is stuff that works really well in it, like, again, the whole set piece where she's going through the house and she winds back up, like back in Scream 1 psychologically while she's like literally walking on a Hollywood recreation of Woodsboro, or the whole even tragic backstory with her mom where she made like cheap exploitation films and was essentially, you know, at a Polanski party that Lance Henriksen was hosting and was abused there. Which results in a big finale that takes place in an old Hollywood house where the director is even named Roman, and there's like a big old screening room, and there's a whole fucking like Scooby-Doo style secret passageways that they're constantly running in and out of, and like props and posters and, you know, shit, hilarious lines like looks like Stab 3's back in production as the killer is starting killing people like around the house. And there's even like a sad detail of like Emily Mortimer, who's playing the actress who's playing Sydney in the Stab films, talking about how she's like, I did not fuck that pig Milton for a lead role just to die. Right before she gets murdered.
Died right away after that.
Yeah, Gale 2 gets murdered. Watching Gale 2 get murdered is kind of like a surreal sequence.
Yeah, definitely. I love the line when the killer's got the knife to Milton himself, the producer, and he's like, Roman, I'll give you final cut. And he's like, already have it. And then slices his neck. That's the type of shit I was looking for throughout. That was unbelievable.
Yeah, like that stuff's great. And also, the big twist making it the director of the movie. Like literally the killer is coming from behind the camera. Craven is the killer.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And then
doing this whole stupid melodramatic backstory where he's like Sydney's half brother. Who from when she, when Maureen was, making these films in Hollywood, and he didn't get to have a nice family like she did, and he actually showed Billy Loomis like the footage of her having an affair, and used his directing and movie making power to get people to do what he wanted. I'm a director, Sid. I direct.
It's.
Like that stuff is all really ridiculous and silly, but it's not much more ridiculous than the second one, honestly. No. I kind of enjoy it. I feel like I would enjoy it just more if, his final set piece was just as gruesome as the second one is. But it's just not as impactful, even though like all of the satirical and thematic stuff about Hollywood is all there. It's all there, like, done decently by Craven. It's just waiting for that next level to make you really feel it.
And I like all the stupid like bullet proof vest reveals that they do in this finale too. God, they're just like, nope, didn't
the,
get
like
me.
Double bulletproof vest twist.
Yeah, like no. It's funny because those things are, they're designed obviously to stop bullets, but they're probably still gonna like break a rib or two. That's what they're known to do because the impact's insane. But I love that these things are just become like an indestructible force. Like if you have it on, you're just all good. And the way they implement it in this finale is very funny because they do a lot of back and forth. Like, nope, I had a vest on too. So that was fun. I also liked the when he's getting stabbed by Sid and she stabs him twice, and I actually wrote it down ironically before I even
Stab
remembered the
3,
line.
right?
Yeah, and she's like, "We think," and then she reveals the vest, and then and then Roman's like, "We think alike," and then she goes, "Stab 3, right?" and stabs him for the final time. It's just so funny,
so dumb, but so great.
I love it. So yeah, that's the type. Oh, and then you also get a callback to Randy and their advice because, you know, this killer wasn't supposed to be like a someone that they had any connection to. It was supposed to be just like a wild card, someone that was unstoppable, an overpowering force. So
it's superhuman.
yeah,
Yeah.
so he's like, but he was supposed to be superhuman, right? And so that turns into another kind of cool action beat where he still has the vest and Dewey doesn't know that. So he just keeps popping him over and over and over again in the chest until finally Sid
Until
is
they
like,
yell at the head,
Dewey,
yeah.
head, and it just caps him, and it's good. So all that, like the final 10-15 minutes has a lot of fun satirical elements. I like the over-the-top melodramatic family stuff that they try to incorporate just because it's so silly and ridiculous. I kind of like the old Hollywood stuff that they throw in, even though I don't think it's as
I was
strong.
gonna say, and it's connected to the Hollywood stuff in the sense
Yes.
that, like, obviously he was born out of Maureen, her horrible experiences that she had in Hollywood, and also he's the director of Stab 3. So like
Right.
all that stuff is like decently thought through and how it all connects to each other. It's just like it definitely just doesn't have the same impact.
No.
When you're actually watching it, you do wonder how that same set piece would have played out if they had constructed something on the Woodsboro set
would have
and
been
done like the full chase sequences.
awesome.
And it could have been as good as Scream 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I also like the little wrap up that Dewey and Gail get, which is just a very Dewey thing to say, which is like, he asked her to marry him or whatever, and she's like, "You're a brave man, Dewey Riley," and he's like, "I'm actually really scared right now," and I just thought that was a cute little Dewey
David
moment.
Arquette, really fun actor. I wish we saw
love
more of him
Arquette.
too. Honestly.
Yeah. I don't know if
Which, by the way, the one thing I'll say about their relationship is that it does feel very genuine, even if they keep kind of running out of ways to kind of like write it for them.
they have good chemistry.
But yeah, Courtney Cox and Arquette are pretty fun, and
Patrick
apparently.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, apparently what I read was that they met on the set of Scream 2. They were dating on the set of Scream. They met on Scream 1, dated on Scream 2, and on Scream 3, they were actually already married.
Oh,
they
wow.
were a couple.
Right. Yeah, I knew at one point Courtney Cox became Courtney Cox Arquette. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it was. This was the first time she ever got that credit, was for this movie, which is kind of cute.
Yeah, that is cute. And then they get married at the end too. So yeah, I think I like that. I do. It's adorable, but I like it.
And you get the moment with Sid that I think works of
Really
her
good.
being terrified and always locking the door, and then the wind pushing the door open while she's at home, and actually just
That's it.
for the first time in her life, like not caring, just like letting it go, going back and joining her friends while they watch a movie.
That legitimately like gives me chills. I just think that it's a really well realized image for her character, and I guess I said this before, but it's really good. I feel the relief, and just that simplicity of like an unlocked door is no longer scary to her. It's just really good. I like that.
Yeah, I think that really works too.
I'll say this is the last thing, because I think
We do got to
covered
wrap it
all
up, I think.
But Patrick Dempsey, I kind of like him in this. I mean, he's just kind of this random cop, but he has one weird moment where I think they were trying to establish like that he was being flirty with Sid, and he gets real close.
Yes.
And they say like the my life is the worst horror movie I've ever seen, or something like that.
And she goes, "Mine too."
Yeah. And the mine too, like the initial thought of that, I don't mind because we're in the movie that we're in, but it doesn't really lead anywhere. And I didn't see that being a thing until that moment when he says that line the way he says it to her. So that just felt like out of left field. And especially him showing up at the end, which I get that they were just trying to express like he didn't die, but it also kind of implies, I guess, that she's dating him now. And I was like, okay. I didn't think that the movie
that was kind of
leading to
introduced at the last minute there, but okay.
Yeah, so I just kind of went, all right, whatever. But it did make me feel like it was kind of a weird unnecessary thing to give her, but whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they do try to set up this thing that I kind of like in theory. I don't know if it necessarily works in the performances, but I do like in theory the thing that the conversation he tries to have about her, where it's like, I'm a cop in Hollywood. I've seen terrible things, and I'm haunted, and I know what it's like to be watching a scary movie in your head alone. And like he's like literally they're trying to connect that he has the same sort of traumas that she does, and they were definitely trying to imply that they were gonna connect in some way on that level. But it's very funny that is literally introduced in like the scene before the final set piece.
Well, that's the thing, because Sid doesn't even show up.
That should have been introduced like so early on. Yeah, apparently Nev Campbell was doing something else and could only do 20 days of shooting. So that's why it takes so long for her to get introduced into the movie.
I was curious because I was like, why is this so focused on everybody but Sid for the first 45 minutes?
It is weird.
But I do like where it eventually leads, so it is forgiven. But yeah, this one is like honestly, it's a lower 3 for me.
Okay, it's kind of a higher 3 for me, honestly, because I think that this is like pretty. I think that this, even if this just had way gorier kills, I feel like I would be more forgiving of the things that I'm not forgiving of in this current existence that it has.
Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, I'm with you. Definitely in the 3 territory. Not as strong as Scream 2, but like there's enough good stuff in there that makes me just kind of wish it was slightly better.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like there's stuff in there that I like, but it just never comes to its full potential like the other 2, especially the first one, of course. And and I just found this one's silliness to be overpowering compared to the balance I think they find better in the second and first one. This one felt just a little too parody-esque in certain regards at times. And I miss kind of that balance that the first one especially
horror,
gives. Yeah, because it was like that you're constantly fighting yourself on whether you feel relief from the comedic like all the jokes that they're doing, but then at the same time the suspense sequences and the horror sequences themselves are just purely that. So I found in this third one it gets a little bit messier in that regard. Like that explosion to me is purely funny. Like there's no the suspense of it is interesting, but the feeling that I get is not horrifying. I am legitimately kind of laughing at it, and I don't know. I don't think I need it to go that far in the satirical realm for my liking on these movies. So I think that's where the low 3 stems for me. But there's a lot of great moments. I like Jamie's part. I do like all the Hollywood satirizing. I do like when the actors really start to get involved with the actual characters. I think that's a good idea. So there's plenty to like. It's just not nearly as strong as the first 2. So.
Yeah, no, I'm basically with you there. I also think that this just suffers that the kills really don't have the same impact that either of the first 2 films have. I think that's target number 1 as like the big issue for me. I think that I would notice less of because that's just it. I feel like you would notice less of the silliness if there were actual stuff that you were horrified by. But I just feel like they really blunted it on the execs end by telling them to tone it down and agreeing with the MPAA to kind of cut this down. And I do think it was a little bit of a mistake to make the legacy characters feel as safe as they do.
Yeah, they're too safe.
Because at least the second one killed Randy off in a way that was kind of
unexpected,
shocking. And so for this to just not, it even seem like, it doesn't even really feel like they're in that much danger, honestly, like Gale or Dewey or anything like that. It feels like all the actors who are playing them are, which is a really cool idea. And I like the fact that they're watching versions, like knockoff B-movie versions of themselves all get murdered. That stuff's really cool. Definitely. But again, you just wish it was more vicious. And also, we know that Williamson at one point really did want to kill them because the second Scream movie, part of the thing that got rewritten was that like apparently like the majority of them were gonna die or something.
Oh wow!
Like it was like crazy. Like I think they at one point flirted with the idea of just making a second one and literally like killing everyone pretty much.
Yeah. That's what I expected from this one first time going in, but.
Yeah, and I don't know that I needed that because again I like the stuff with Sid, but I feel like someone should have went down in a dramatic way that actually made you feel for the characters a little bit more, and even the idea that Williamson also flirted of the idea of also having insane stab movie fans being the ones at one point who were going to be like kind of like a subplot, who were going to be either a red herring or they were going to actually be the ones who were going to be the killers and stuff like that. So they had a lot of ideas that they were throwing around with the sequels in particular. And yeah, I don't know that all of them worked, but you know, I got to respect that this franchise, because Craven is directing the entire thing, it has a level of consistency that even if it's not there in the writing, you know, is still there when you're watching a lot of the actual sequences. I just wish this had some stronger sequences to it.
Yeah. Agreed.
Because again, I really like a lot of the ideas of setting this on the Stab 3 set, you know, having them walk around the recreation of the Woodsboro set, throwing in the Polanski and Weinstein sicko party shit of Hollywood into that, especially in the cheap exploitation B movie days that her mom was a part of, and having the director be the killer and actually like directing all of these sequences that are taking place. Like it's still very, very playful in that way. And you can tell that Craven was involved in the writing process. Yeah. It's just, it's very clear that, he was not given all the tools he needed to take it to the level it needed to go. Even though you can see the ambition is there to go there. So yeah. Just a solid to high 3 for me. But, yeah, is that it? Are we done? Can we wrap it up? Okay, we did 3 movies. It was a big one. I knew it was going to be big, but that's all, folks. Yep, that's Scream. That's a wrap on Scream 1996, Scream 2 1997, and Scream 3 2000. I
don't think we missed.
I feel like we. No, I'm sure people will yell at us because there's tons of amazing trivia and writing and history and all kinds of things out there. I'm sure there's some scenes or lines that we could have brought up, but we don't have all the time in the world.
Yeah, we could have made this a 6-hour episode if we really wanted to.
Yes. Hopefully the new Scream is good. I got some doubts because Craven, I just said that the thing that makes this franchise so kind of incredible is that Craven was kind of behind all of them, and we don't even have time to get into number 4, but number 4 is surprisingly great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And to me, it's basically just it's basically just as good as Scream 2, and I almost wonder on rewatch if I'm gonna even like it more, because it's really, really strong, and it does a lot of really great stuff coming out in the 2010s.
Yeah, new media that they're focusing on.
Yeah, well, because he had an entire decade of horror to kind of respond to that he was a part of bringing in. I mean, like literally there were torture porn filmmakers doing remakes of his Hills Have Eyes movies and stuff. So like, Craven had more to get involved with in Scream 4, and even more of a the whole like online fan culture and like YouTubers and shit like that. Yeah. And that kind of stuff gets involved in the 4th one, and it sounds like it wouldn't work. It sounds like it would be very old manny critiquing the next millennial generation or whatever,
but it's not.
But no, Craven really, really nailed it on the directing level, and that movie is really nasty. So would recommend checking out Scream 4, even though we don't have time to cover it. And hopefully Scream 5 is not terrible.
Yeah.
That is the main goal. That is the vibes we're putting out into the world. Yeah. So I think that wraps it up for everything this week. We're going to be back in 1 week's time, where we are going to be over on the bonus feed. We are going to be going full on grindhouse exploitation mode. We are going to be talking about a collaboration between Ernst Pickle, I can't remember his name, Pickle or something, and Ron Ormond. This is a collaboration between a magician turned exploitation filmmaker and a literal psycho Baptist church freak, getting together and making films, where the Baptist minister wrote the films and made one called Burning Hell, which is a movie which is, as described, is literally just reenactments of hell, trying to scare the shit out of you, to let you know that hell is a real place that you're going to if you don't stop sinning. And then If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do, which is his same depiction, but a reenactment of what would happen in America if communism were to take over. And both of them are incredibly unhinged propaganda films by a psycho-religious man, but both of them are surprisingly effective as actual pieces of grindhouse filmmaking, which is a delicious irony we will get into, especially in Burning Hell, because Burning Hell literally has a scene where it's like the teens who go to the drive-ins and make out are sinners, and like this is while operating in the exact kind of form that those kids would be watching.
That's awesome.
And then in 2 weeks' time, over on the main feed for all listeners, we have a fucking huge episode. We are going to be back with a guest, and we are going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's The King of Comedy, a personal favorite, I think, for Jamie and I believe. And we are going to be pairing it with the film Perfect Blue, which is a film I don't think Jamie or I have seen yet.
Nope, been on my list forever.
Same with me. So either way, that's going to be a really big episode, I imagine, because I think we both 5 King of Comedy, and I know a lot of people out there think Perfect Blue is an incredible film. So going to have a big talk with a special guest, and that's what you guys can expect on the main feed in 2 weeks. But yeah, that being said, that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.